winter vegetables and winter fruits was all I ate. And over a 3-week period, I lost all the weight that I had gained over a period of a couple of years. All my aches and pains disappeared, unbelievable clarity of mind, energy abounding. And I started to introduce foods back in. And I found that the biggest problem of all was wheat. Going back to culture and tradition for me was really important to understand why was wheat my problem and why did I see so many other people with a wheat issue and with a gluten issue.
It's the cultivation of wheat and other of these agrarian products that has allowed civilization to spread. It's allowed exploration. It's given us a food that was easily transportable, would not spoil, and a very, very concentrated source of calories.
The transition from the hunter-gatherer mode of existence, which constituted 99% of our prehistory before we started eating grains, was like a dramatic shift in consciousness as well as a dietary shift.
Wheat played a critical role in our becoming civilized. It enabled us not to be hunter-gatherers, but instead enabled us to be agriculturalists.
Certainly without the development of agriculture, which involves grain products of some type, we would not have society as we know it today.
If you look at the history of wheat, it's attained sort of glorified status secularly. The Food and Agriculture Organization, which is the UN's arm for defeating world hunger, has as its emblem a head of wheat. It's been glorified religiously as well as irreplaceably a representation of, the body of Christ. When you have such a profound set of memes deep within the substratum of the human psyche, to indict the credibility of a very powerful industry is really a radical thing in most people's eyes.
We became a civilization because of wheat. That doesn't mean that it didn't come at a price.
Traditional preparation techniques took a long time before. They didn't have yeast, for example. They had a sour culture, and it took a couple days to make a loaf of bread. And it was basically a fermentation process. And all grains need fermentation to make it healthy. Today they have methods where they start with the wheat, and in 2 hours it's in the plastic bag as a loaf of bread. And so all of the anti-nutrients, all of the irritants that are naturally in wheat, all wheat, even ancient wheat, are still there because they prepared it so quickly.
Those little tweaks were what enabled us to survive, because sourdough uses certain types of yeast, and there are other bacteria involved that will break down a lot of the proteins that we're talking about that can cause massive destructive changes in the body.
So our culture and tradition taught us how to eat foods that may have otherwise not been good for us, that are now we're able to use properly. But we've thrown away culture and tradition. Dr. Kellogg's was a gentleman who was a vegetarian. He didn't like meat. He believed that people need to eat carbohydrates. He had a health farm in the early part of the 1900s in the Midwest, near where my mother was brought up. And he realized that we had trouble eating grain. And so he prepared the grain in a certain way so people could eat it.
His early work was fairly profound in raising the awareness, at least here in America, that food mattered in terms of health.
Dr. Kellogg had the sanatorium where he was pushing a plant-based, high-fiber diet. So there was a gradual transition from a breakfast, a hearty breakfast that was meat and eggs, or oatmeal with butter and cream, to the breakfast cereals with skim milk.
It was actually his brother that took on the whole role of Kellogg's cornflakes. And, growing up in the 60s and 70s, Kellogg's cornflakes was the food to eat.
Those Kellogg cornflakes are wonderful. Well, do you know anyone who doesn't like Kellogg's cornflakes? Not a solitary soul.
Really important problem at the time was that people were not getting enough calories. And unfortunately, that then exploded, and I think, in a direction that was maybe not anticipated at the time.
Now, if you know your oats and want to feel your oats,
the initial rationale for breakfast cereals was quite noble, right? Let's create a shelf-stable product that is going to allow people to get the calories they need to not die of starvation. Unfortunately, from there, it went to a place where now all of our calories are shelf-stable and convenient and devoid of actual vital nutrition.
By the time we got to the 60s and 70s, they were fortifying it with minerals as well as vitamins.
We've had to add vitamins and minerals to it in order to deal with malnutrition.
The whole idea of fortification is we've taken out the bran and the germ, and so we're going to put these vitamins back in to replace them. They can hardly replace what we've taken out.
The whole biological system has a natural way of working where when nutrients are present, they're present in context, and the context is everything else that's in that nutrient.
Where are they getting these minerals from, and where are they getting these vitamins from? They're not getting them from food sources. They're actually getting them from chemical laboratories or mining them from the ground. Ancel Keys was instrumental in the sequence of events that led to us eating more and more wheat.
Ancel Keys proved to be the harbinger of a major global indication that fat was to be demonized and that fat was responsible for just about everything bad you can imagine in the world.
He reached the conclusion that it was the drop in consumption of butter and eggs that was associated with the drop in cardiac mortality.
He went to 21 countries, but only 7 of those countries actually proved his theory that fat caused heart disease.
He fabricated the story, really, about the relationship between cholesterol and heart disease by selecting nations that fit on his curve and throwing away all the rest. And it's amazing that his chart had so much impact on how we were told to eat.
That same data could be examined and has been examined by other scientists to say it was the drop in sugar consumption that occurred at the same time that was associated with the drop in cardiovascular mortality.
Fast forward to the present, and the children are getting extruded cereal, Cheerios, skim milk, sugar, margarine, vegetable oils. There's nothing in that breakfast to nourish any part of the body.
This was the beginning of fat being bad and carbohydrates being good. And this was the beginning of the end of bacon and eggs for breakfast and the beginning of breakfast cereals just soaring through the ranks of the favorite breakfast for the modern American household. There was a gentleman by the name of Norman Borlaug, and he was a scientist that worked for the Corn and Wheat Board. And they were wanting to mechanize the production of wheat. What his ultimate aim was, and I think it was a noble aim, was to feed starving countries such as India and Pakistan. And they called it the Green Revolution.
The Green Revolution performed two roles. First, it created a market for the chemicals that had no markets after the war, but it also allowed the different paths for rural transformation.
Monocultures in the landscape meant that there were more chemicals being put down. So a monoculture is where it's just one field of wheat or one field of soya or one field of corn. And as a result of that, and as a result of the chemicals that were being used and the unhealthiness of these plants, it all led to these plants becoming less and less resistant to disease and needing more and more chemicals in order to survive any pests that may want to eat them.
Any monoculture will produce more of that. Monoculture is not such a big deal, but it produces less of everything else that was displaced. What Borlaug did was take a wheat that had been stolen from Japan, called norim, and crossed it.
He hybridized wheat grain from different countries that would never have hybridized naturally together.
The physics of this is that the shortening of the stem allowed more weight to be carried on top of the plant. The other thing was that it could be harvested a lot faster because you didn't have as much chaff. But see, in olden days, the chaff, the straw, the leftovers from the seed head, those were just as valuable as the seeds for bedding livestock.
We had bred plants for balance, to give food for animals through the straw and humans through the grain.
By the end of 1945, which was the end of the war, the people that were producing the chemicals for warfare began creating the chemicals for our agriculture. Instead of looking at the health of the plant, they looked at the yield of the plant.
The wheat that has been developed now was developed for commercial reasons. It produces a much higher yield, and it's far more profitable to grow, and it's easier to grow.
The yield has increased substantially, and that has caused this pervasive abundance of wheat globally. And again, it really has caused us as a world now to be pretty much founded on a notion that wheat needs to be an important part of our diets.
Only the Western world produced enough grain to feed 11 billion people. 11 billion. We only have, short of 8 billion on the planet. So we are over-producing grain.
690 million tons of wheat that are produced every year indicate just how much money is at stake. This is a very difficult time for those who are more concerned about the truth and about what's best for health versus, the powers that be that don't want people to know the truth about wheat.
And I understand grain as being precious, but what we did was we took this preciousness and suddenly gorged ourselves on its availability once we were able to figure out how to grow it limitlessly. And instead of just being grateful, we have turned into an orgy of abuse.
So here we are in the 1970s and 1980s. We've had the influences of seducing the housewife out of the kitchen with foods that were prepared, such as breakfast cereals. We've had the influence of Ansel Keys, more carbohydrates, less fats. We've now had Norman Borlaug produce a grain where we've got heaps and heaps of wheat available to us, or monocultures available to us. And we're getting to the people of America are getting fatter, they're getting more disease, and nutritional guidelines start to be introduced.
So we created this higher carbohydrate, lower fat calorie idea, which was called here in America the food pyramid, which was the most perverse recommendation for human health that has ever been conceived.
The history shows very, very clearly that the food pyramid was largely agricultural influences. The rationale that they were given when grains, which had been at the top of the original draft of the food pyramid, was suddenly put at the bottom, was that, poor people can't afford to have a diet that's based on fruits and vegetables and meats and seafood.
When we first started publishing the food guidelines, it was pitched to the agricultural community as another effective way to help market their products.
It is not based on any nutritional science. It is not based on any clinical or medical observation. It has been created by politicians who are protecting the interests of the wealthy.
The food that we're eating as a society these days, that is extreme. And if you put a supermarket in the same spot 100 years ago and got people to walk in there and say, this is the future of food, what do you think they would have said? They would have thought you were crazy. And they probably would have tried something and thought, people eat this. daily. And think about it.
Wheat is probably the most problematic food in the modern diet. It doesn't need to be, but it needs to be treated with respect and prepared properly.
Over the last 4, 5, 6 decades, our wheat has changed dramatically. So much so that it doesn't even resemble what it used to.
The way it's raised, the hybridization, the way it's processed, the additives, the amount that we're eating.
So we're not only just being exposed to what we're consuming, but we're being exposed to it on our skin as well. So we now find wheat or parts of wheat in our cosmetics. It's found in our supplements. It's found in our medications. It's found in our additives, preservatives and flavorings. If you see the word glucose or maltodextrose or dextrose, these are all wheat-based sugars. Even ascorbic acid is made from wheat, and that's our vitamin C. So all of a sudden, because there's so much wheat around and they're realising that they can manipulate wheat through chemical processes, it's now found in just about every corner of our life.
Wheat is in everything. It's in everything. It's everywhere. And I think because it's such a subsidized crop, so it becomes such a cheap ingredient. So if you need an ingredient that is an anti-caking agent, well, you can use wheat starch. If you need an ingredient that's a binder, you can get a different chemical that's derived from wheat. You can use every part of wheat. So a lot of the chemicals that we see in processed foods, in cosmetics, in cleaners, in shampoos, they come from the byproduct of wheat production for foodstuffs. And so we end up trying to use every part. We find uses for these chemicals that used to be thrown away and should be thrown away.
You know, I see a lot of folks are taking vitamins and supplements. They fail to read the ingredients and may not realize that it's probably contaminated with gluten or contaminated with gluten.
Wheat straw extract is used in probably 80 to 90% of the skincare industry. So it is used a lot to help emulsify things. Wheat and gluten can be in many different forms. Things as straight as wheat germ oil, right through to things like wheat proteins. You can get, there's definitely different forms of wheat that we put into the product that have gluten in them, and often they're used as emulsifiers or emollients, or they're used as surfactants. They're often used to help retain moisture in the skin. So they are definitely a part of the skincare world.
For me, I'm always very, very careful in picking what products. We don't even have Play-Doh in my house because it's made with wheat. I don't notice an immediate reaction if I use a shampoo that has gluten. But I notice it build up over time, that I'm starting to just feel less energetic. I'm starting to see joint pain. So I'm starting to see signs of inflammation in my body.
This is a very individual response. Some people can get by. They just have to have their diet clean, but they seem to be okay in terms of their skin. Others are so sensitive, myself being one of them, that if somebody puts makeup on me that has gluten in it, while it won't trigger my face pain, it does cause severe burning, aching pain in my legs.
In history, and not that long ago, probably in India in the 40s and 50s, many things were being grown on a land that then, a decade or two later, was all one grain. All of these things helped resist diseases, resist pests, gave nutrition to the people that lived and grew these foods. If it was an animal and plant society, the animals would fertilize the land and then the plants would be grown afterwards. So we actually use animals and plants We use different plants to help other plants to survive and to be healthy, and that in turn gave us the nutrition that we needed in order to be healthy, strong human beings.
Well, the basics are pretty simple. There is no animal-less ecology. Think about that. I mean, that sounds so profound, so simple, but it's elegant. There is no animal-less ecology, and yet all around the world we're trying to grow grain and grow food with no animals. And the animals are confined in concentrated animal feeding operations here. Their manure develops dead zones here, and the chemical fertilizers from the grain production over here creates dead zones over there. Both systems become liabilities instead of both systems being tightly integrated into a regenerative package.
As I continued to learn about wheat, I then started to look at our modern agriculture. My mother was born in 1937 in Iowa, USA, in the Midwest. In 1938 and 1939, there was a plague of locusts, and they decided to use arsenic on the wheat fields and the cornfields in the Midwest. After that period, my mother, who was the eldest of 11, other siblings started to be born. So there were 7 boys in that family. 6 were born hemophiliac. Now, hemophilia was never in our family. We went back generation after generation trying to find the gene. It wasn't there. Could it have been the chemical revolution, the arsenic that was being sprayed, and the beginning of DDT being sprayed that may have caused the genetic change in my grandmother that then gave a family so much disease as far as hemophilia goes? By 1945, DDT was being sprayed, and DDT is now banned because of the ramifications of that chemical. But DDT was being sprayed on the cornfields and the wheat fields, and I remember being told by my mother that my grandfather was very much against the new chemical farming. But there were so many people that were for this. They said, this is the new way, this is the way that farming's going to go. But he had this sixth sense that it wasn't what we needed to do.
1 gram of dirt in its natural state has an incredible number of living organisms within it that allows balance, that allows renewability. But in modern agriculture, the soil is absolutely sterilized.
We have been degrading land for a long, long time, but now we're able to accelerate it. I think that's kind of what's changed in this century. That's why we're desertifying faster. We're eroding soil faster. Up until 2 years ago, nature moved soil more than human activity. Dust storms, floods, that sort of thing. And now humans move more soil than nature for the first time in human history. And that should give us pause.
Chemical fertilization leaves your foods and crops deficient in vital minerals, trace elements, micronutrients, because the soil is not getting those nutrients. Your soil is becoming desertified.
Modern wheat has at least 10 applications of chemicals from start to finish, starting with a spray they put on the seeds to make them sprout. They have hormone sprays to make their stalks strong, hormone sprays to make them come into seed all at the same time, and then they have fumigants in the warehouse. So all of these chemicals are applied to wheat, and that's just the beginning. That's before they start processing.
Sir Albert Howard said it so well in 1943 in an agricultural testament. He said, when you use artificial manures to make artificial soil, it grows artificial plants, which then create artificial animals, which make artificial people who can only be sustained with artificials.
It's really interesting to see how many foods are now today being thought of as toxic or as not good for us, for example, wheat, and wheat is the staff of life. And now we say, oh no, wheat's not a good food, we shouldn't be eating wheat. And no one's thinking about maybe there's something in the wheat now that there didn't used to be there that's causing this problem.
You still there, Hank? Yeah, kid. They sprayed us good, huh? Yeah, good. I never thought we'd get sprayed in the garden. But we'll be okay, huh? We've been sprayed before, huh, Hank? Sure, kid. But I gotta tell you, my roots hurt real bad. Hank, whoever did this is gonna pay. Hank, they're gonna pay big. Hank!
Roundup kills weeds where others can't. Roundup, no root, no weed, no problem.
Roundup you probably have in your garage at the moment or in your tool shed. You probably spray it on your grass. Your sports grounds are probably sprayed with it. Your parks are sprayed with it. Many of our foods are sprayed with it. It's everywhere.
Glyphosate is the active ingredient in the pervasive herbicide Roundup, which is used in chemical agriculture extensively and also used on people's lawns. And it's unregulated, very poorly monitored, actually, and very poorly measured. The glyphosate in the wheat is causing such a train wreck in the body that it's no wonder that we can't eat the wheat. We're seeing multiple different problems of the gut on the rise today in children as well as in elderly people. Everybody, really, all ages are being affected. And I think the glyphosate is a major player in that problem.
My big concern about Roundup is what it does to the gut flora. And once you've got your gut flora messed up, then digestion becomes very, very difficult.
Now, the argument in favor of using glyphosate that humans shouldn't worry about is because glyphosate only affects plants and bacteria. Okay? We are 10 times more bacteria than we are human cells. Therefore, glyphosate becomes a major issue for us to be real concerned about.
They say we don't have the shikimate pathway as humans, which is what is disrupted in plants when plants get killed by Roundup. We have that pathway through the bacteria in our gut.
The shikimate pathway is a process that happens in plants and bacteria, and it converts fructose that we consume into a compound called PEP, which then, through a series of steps, makes our beautiful aromatic proteins or amino acids, which then turn into our neurotransmitters. 90% of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. If we don't have the bacteria that make these neurotransmitters through the shikimate pathway, then we don't have enough neurotransmitters, and therefore our brains don't work as well as they could. We don't think as well as we could.
And it's amazing how many things come from the shikimate pathway, including, for example, folate, which is an essential B vitamin, and vitamin K, and serotonin, melatonin, melanin, dopamine, epinephrine. These are all really, really important molecules in the nervous system.
So as my journey continued in the discovery of why wheat could be such a bad thing when we needed it for cultural tradition, and I realized that not only were we destroying the plant and the nutrition of the plant and how we were consuming this plant, but we were also destroying our body's ability to digest it. And so you put those two combinations together, and what you're left with is the perfect storm of insidious events with our health that are being caused as a result of us playing with nature.
The fact that now we're growing it in a way where we're putting in, I guess, poisons would be the correct term for it, can't be serving anyone's health for the better.
So as our society changes to one that is much more focused on work hard, play hard, and we sacrifice sleep, we sacrifice time in our own heads, we sacrifice stress management. At the same time as our diets are getting more and more nutrient void and richer in inflammatory compounds, we are creating a perfect storm of events for chronic illness. And we are seeing not just an increase in celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, but we're seeing an increase in just about every chronic illness that we have the capacity to diagnose.
We've exchanged infectious disease for chronic disease. And instead of appreciating where our technology would take us in, being able to bathe more frequently and have refrigerators and
all that
have
good
more
shit.
Sanitation,
all that good shit,
and get us away from infectious disease and enjoy that, we simply let that pendulum swing clear over to chronic, and now we have type 2 diabetes and obesity and autism is through the roof.
Wheat is contributing to an inflammatory state in our bodies, both by being inherently inflammatory and also by displacing foods in our diet that would allow us to have a more robust immune system.
Even the poor are getting diabetes because they're living on a starch diet without any balance in their diet.
I mean, a typical diet is, pasta, bread, pizza crust, and then shredded wheat for breakfast, and biscuits and muffins, and all of that requires insulin to digest. And so you're just creating a perfect situation for diabetes to develop. There's an overlap of all these symptoms going on. And these reactions can manifest with any group of symptoms under the sun. It can be a migraine headache, it can be an asthma attack, it can be a panic attack, it can be depression, it can be mood swings, it can be a skin rash, it can be a cystitis, it can be nephropathy, it can be anything.
You just can't continue to douse your food with neurotoxins and not expect it to show up in the human population. Simply thinking should make us head down a different path.
Heard the man say simply thinking. See, we were taught to think stupidly. So we were taught to be stupid.
In the wheat grain, it may not just be the gluten and the gliadin that is the problem, the proteins in our wheat. We also had sugar in the wheat, and that sugar is called fructan. And when we chop fructan up into little pieces, that's fructose. And one of the diseases or maladies that we're now seeing is fructose malabsorption.
We're starting to understand that irritable bowel syndrome is, at least in many cases, is actually fructose malabsorption. So it's actually our body's not being able to absorb fructose effectively and overfeeding bacteria.
So we used to
make so much fucking money
large amounts of fructose
that they ain't putting this shit out there.
For all of our
existence.
We ate it in complex, in a natural food,
of life,
such as a piece of fruit, which has millions of other substances in it, and they're all necessary. They all balance each other out. If you take fructose out and present it on its own as a molecule to the human body, that can become toxic.
The input to the shikimate pathway is PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate. And the step that glyphosate disrupts is the very first step that converts PEP to the next thing in the chain. And PEP is also the output of a pathway that breaks down fructose. So ordinarily, the gut microbes take in fructose, convert it to PEP, and then the PEP supplies the input to the shikimate pathway. But what happens when glyphosate's in the way is that PEP piles up. And when PEP piles up, it's going to suppress the ability of the microbes to continue to break down the fructose. So the fructose is going to end up in the lower gut and get processed into fat by the microbes in the lower gut, producing gas, for example. And if those microbes are not sufficient to manage all the fructose that's being eaten, then the fructose is going to go to the liver, and the liver is going to have to process the fructose into fat also. And in doing so, the liver will become either fatty liver, or it will release a lot of LDL particles, giving you high cholesterol. Even if we were to, right this moment, just suddenly ban glyphosate, the soil itself would also be an issue, because glyphosate in some soils, it can last over 20 years.
One of the things that I recognized is that my gastrointestinal tract was probably not working as well as it could. It wasn't digesting the wheat. And as I researched about the microbiome and realized the enormity of this amazing group of organisms that help us have the nutrition we need to make our nutrition, digest our food, help us with our immunity, produce our neurotransmitters. It's an enormous job for a bunch of microorganisms.
This collection of more than 100 trillion bacteria that live within each and every one of us that are really ultimately determining whether we're going to be healthy or not, the balance point of our immune system, whether we have inflammation, whether we are fat or lean, and even play a role in our mood from moment to moment.
And I try to tell you,
gut microbes are adapted to the environment that the person lives in, to the diet that the person is eating.
Glyphosate wreaks havoc on our microbiome. It inhibits our ability to have access to certain important minerals because it acts as a chelating agent, and it downregulates our ability to utilize vitamin D.
Your gut flora changes more and more towards being more pathogenic and more hostile to you than friendly. It stops serving you, it becomes unbalanced more and more.
Our microbiome is passed on through the generations. So not only does the great-grandmother give to the grandmother, give to the mother, give to the daughter, to the granddaughter, the genetics, they also pass on the microbiome. And I realized that my grandmother would have had a fairly intact microbiome to give to my mother. But through the chemical revolution, my mother's probably would have been slowly eroded, which she then gave to my sister and to myself, which I then give to my children.
Children who are at high risk for celiac disease because of genetic markers are less likely to develop celiac disease if they have high levels of bifidobacteria in their gut.
Bifidus is one of those parts of our microbiome that helps us digest our grains and helps us digest wheat and helps us break down the protein gluten into amino acids.
And right after
it's very interesting to see that when you have dairy and wheat in your diet, you have high bifida. If you don't, then those bifida disappear.
And pray to
but if you have bifida that are being harmed by a protein and you're eating wheat and milk, then the wheat and milk are going to become toxic. You're not going to be able to properly digest them, and they're going to become toxic.
First thing that's depleting bifidobacteria from the gut are antibiotics. And they're very sensitive to antibiotics. They're very fragile organisms. And when I've done stool tests on patients,
think about
bifidobacteria
all these different
things
missing. You was taught
every week. There's something published that adds to our understanding of the importance of these microbes and the way that they affect our health.
Why?
What's the best source of bifidus?
To get on your knees and say, I'll fall reward and help.
And we kind of see milk and grains together. Well, the raw milk has that bifidus factor in it. Once we pasteurize our milk, it's gone. So the raw dairy it could very well be the missing factor for being able to digest food.
The classification of the creator being the sexes of a man. Why? They didn't say that the creator was the sexes of a woman. When you already know that all the love and the compassion is in a woman, not a fucking man. And it ain't no fucking way possible that a woman can come from the fucking ribs of a fucking man. That's just the gay mafia motherfucking story to take away the motherfucking glory of the only creator here on fucking earth consciously thinking is the motherfucking woman. Man is nothing but a fucking donator to that fucking creator.
Healthy after I'd eliminated.
When that man found out that shit, he got jealous.
Had to fix.
That's why this gay bullshit to jump to the motherfucking front. Because of the fucking story that man was fucking telling.
Which then was causing
bunch of fucking bullshit.
Gliadin, the gluten protein that is in wheat, has
been shown to cause problems with parasites in cell lining, causing issues that may result in what we call gut.
Won't let this go out. Oh,
literally,
I guarantee you,
to allow undigested
this will get, you will get mutant.
Open up and
they will make this shit do
healing the gut lining
waves and shit.
Is job one.
Ain't gonna let this go out.
Dealing with virtually any degenerative
the truth is just the truth. You was born here, an empty glass, waiting for some fucking truth. Because if you were told the fucking truth, you wouldn't be as stupid as you are being stupid. But this is what you was taught to be. Fucking stupid.
When it comes to celiac disease.
Think about it. You believe in a God and a fucking Jesus and something outside of you more divine than in you.
And then absorbing, and then these building blocks, the amino acids,
the power in you
reconstituted into human
is working against all the things that's outside you that you're praying to, that you believe in.
And when that exposes the insides of the damaged cells,
it got you inside out, people. It got y'all believing outside that there's a creator outside you that's not inside you, creating all the things for you to be a creator too. What the fuck? We've been taught to be fucking stupid.
That has glyphosate, transaminase, and gliadinol put together. And that molecule is
do you understand understand what I'm saying?
The body sees it as something it doesn't like.
The man.
And it develops an immune reaction.
Donated his sperm to the woman.
This is the more difficult.
When they came together in a creator's original love. When you come together with a man and you be a woman, or you come together as a woman with a man, when that opposite sex attract in the creator's name, love, they don't attract in God. Stupid.
As I started to learn more and research,
you don't attract in God, they're attracting the creator's original name and the creator's being. Love, unconditionally, to feel it. Man put the fucking title on the creator as being God and that bullshit.
And my weight, but it may attack something else or somebody else. And what I realized is that the most important part of the body that's affected is the neural tree. And the neural tree is our nervous system, brain, spine, to our little finger. Everything could be affected depending on your susceptibility.
That they have to take care so that matter could do for itself on its own.
Tree.
See, I don't talk to y'all ass no more.
We all know patients who've got celiac disease.
I talk straight to y'all heart.
And patients
because your ass is full of fucking shit.
And when the
stupid because you were taught to be stupid, your ass will never be smart.
They've got gut problems, they've got bloating, they've got irritability, they've got headaches, they've begun to itch, scratch, all within 15-20 minutes. That can't be symptoms from a disturbed gut. It can't be from the increase in gut damage which is causing you pain, because the gut doesn't have that sensation. So where does these symptoms come?
You got me on my focus
we can diagnose through
tests off the board. Everything I know how to live and keep a fucking second.
We can diagnose a wheat allergy.
Like I said, dog, use the beast with it, bro.
But there's another part of this.
One, I guess you gotta go, dog.
Non-celiac gluten sensitivity. We can't diagnose that. We have no tests for it. The only way you will know whether you have non-celiac is if you eliminate wheat and see what happens to your symptoms.
The other guy on the screen.
And I see children full tummy, regurgitation, gastric reflux, headaches and migraine.
Because you don't have a chance in the world to deal with that boy and shit that he do.
Chronic diarrhea, not growing properly, irritability,
use a fool with and
attention deficit syndrome.
But that's what I was saying about
nobody can say without doing blood tests
the original creator of it all.
So when you do the blood test and you find they don't have celiac disease, they can still react to gluten.
Why do we see so much more celiac disease, gluten intolerance? Why is that so prevalent now? And it comes in part from the fact that wheat is in more foods. It's a larger proportion of our diets. The wheat itself is now grown to have more problematic compounds because the problematic compounds in it actually make it more resilient as a crop to disease. So the same things that protect wheat from insects and disease are the same things that are the most inflammatory for our bodies.
I've published peer-reviewed journal articles on headache being related to gluten sensitivity. Dr. Marius Hadjivassiliou in England has published extensively on the neurologic consequences of non-celiac gluten-related sensitivity, including cognitive issues and difficulties with how your brain works, certainly mood issues. We have seen plenty of peer-reviewed data that even correlates schizophrenia with...
That's the bullshit that we was taught. It's like we was taught to believe in Santa Claus, eat bunny, all the rest of the bullshit. You're adults now. It's time to know. Stop lying to the fucking kids. Telling the motherfucking truth. Because if you continue telling the kids the same shit that you learned as adults, you are doing nothing but teaching motherfucking kids to be stupid fucking adults too.
Everybody can eat wheat.
We gotta break the cycle to make the circle back to being a circle going around. The only way that it's supposed. Your heart beats with the magnetic rotational pull of this earth, pulling you into tomorrow.
Issues with weight,
because there is no such thing as
they didn't even know why they had those health issues.
Gone tomorrow. The truth is, here today, gone today. Because ain't nobody promised tomorrow. So fuck all the bullshit.
And the effect that it has on the neural tree, we're now seeing almost an epidemic of people with issues that our current medical system doesn't know what to do with, except perhaps give a medication to subside the symptom. But the idea is that we need to get to the cause.
There is no part of the body that is immune from the damaging effects of gluten. The reason being is that there's no part of the body that is excluded from the mechanism of inflammation. Your joints can become inflamed.
Our food is like rat poison for
blood
rats.
vessels become inflamed.
It takes a while for the rat to die from the poison.
If you have
it takes a while for us to die from the same poison. Don't nobody die from natural causes no more.
Psychiatric problems, other neurologic disorders, and now unfortunately physicians on average
ain't the water that's killing you, it's the air. And then you do it with the motherfucking food because you don't care.
All they know is the drugs.
But once you start getting sick and they tell you that you're dying, then you decide to kill. That's too fucking late.
You have this illness.
Now you're crying. That's the bullshit that you was taught. To be stupid.
When my sister was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease back in the 1980s, and her disease was chronic.
Why put something dead into a living fucking body?
I didn't even learn about it in school.
Come on, people.
Yet
that's
now we are seeing a phenomenal growth in autoimmune diseases. In actual fact, there are more than 100 diseases that have been indicated to be autoimmunity.
The prevalence of autoimmune conditions is soaring. Here in America, it's been estimated that about 17% of us suffers from an autoimmune condition, and that's breathtaking.
So what does autoimmunity mean? It means that the body has lost its intelligence to know what is its friend and what is its enemy.
The immune system has suddenly lacked developed a situation where it cannot determine self versus non-self, where your body's immune system is reacting against your own tissue, as you see in lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis.
So it may affect your thyroid, your joints, your brain, which ends up in Alzheimer's and dementia, kidneys, heart, blood vessels, pancreas. So instead of attacking viruses and bacteria that are entering from the outside, it starts to attack the proteins which look like the bacteria and the viruses
on the inside.
You get more than just edit points. You get seniority.
A growing collection of studies linking gluten to autoimmune disease. And in fact, in every study in which we've looked to see if there's a link, we have found one. We are starting to put together that an intolerance to gluten may be part of all autoimmune diseases.
Is wheat sensitivity at the root of every autoimmune case? Probably not. But leaky gut is probably at the beginning of every autoimmune illness. But for many, gluten will have been that first step.
I believe that gluten does trigger autoimmune disease. And autoimmune doctors, when they study gluten, they study that disease, for instance, multiple sclerosis, vitiligo, alopecia, thyroiditis, all these diseases. They always find a connection between that autoimmune disease.
They causing chaos.
Autoimmune conditions are life-threatening. People die from autoimmune conditions.
They got to be done.
I make sure,
that's not bullshit.
As best I can, that my patients get the message that they've got to ditch gluten 100%.
We got conscious thinking, and we're not kids, and we're not playing no games.
Autoimmunity requires, as we know today, three main factors. One is our genetics. Two is the environment, so the food you consume, the chemicals around you. And the third is what protects your body from the outside world, and that is the gut lining. By becoming aware of your environment, the chemicals that are in it, the way your food is produced, then you can turn on a new set of genes. You can turn on the genes for health.
We haven't changed genetically, but we have absolutely changed epigenetically, meaning how we're controlling our genome.
That's why I give you 4 periods of your life.
Gene profile
and I give it to you right now.
Interacting with
your mama misheard one,
food, with
you live in one,
sleep we get,
you die in one. And your only death certificate here
all of these factors are changing our genetic expression moment to moment.
I'm just trying to tell you.
And empowering is the notion that about 70%
all that divine in you
genes that are involved in health and longevity are controlled by factors over which we have control.
We give all that to somebody believes in some God and Jesus bullshit. So when you sit there and you think about it, who?
I've been studying epigenetics, and it's quite remarkable
being in between
how quickly things can go downhill.
No fucking
generational effect. Sometimes these things get worse with the next generation. So there's a memory at the epigenetic level. You know, there's been a lot of concentration on the genes and looking at the mutations and thinking in terms of proteins being made incorrectly. But there's a whole other level to DNA. That's probably much more complicated and much more important than the actual gene sequence of the genes. And this has to do with these modifications to the DNA that happen, for example, during development. So methylation of the DNA. And methylation depends upon methionine. And methionine is depleted by glyphosate. So when you don't have enough methionine, then the DNA gets hypomethylated in the brain. And that has been linked to autism. So it's really scary to think about the consequences.
Every bite of food we take has a hormonal impact within the body, and that we have this incredible ability to affect how our genes express themselves. Our genes do not act in a vacuum. Our genes aren't self-determined. Our genes require input from us to turn on or off. I think all of this comes down to personal responsibility and choices and a willingness to take on a role primarily for oneself. The first order of business is to fix your own house, to clean up your own house and get yourself in good condition.
One of the things that you start to do is start listening to your body. Look at from the tip of your head to your little toe and scan your body as to what are the problems that are happening now. Because more often than not what we do is we stop listening to our body and we just take a medication to dull the symptoms.
If the body is whispering at you with any condition, be it a headache, rheumatoid arthritis, a skin condition, an eczema, dermatitis, then I would be looking at everything. I would be looking at what I'm putting into my body first and foremost, because we know that healthy cells grow from the inside out. But then what I'm putting on the outside is just as important to me.
I remember when I had to give up weight, and I realised that if I didn't give it up, then I was going to keep gaining weight, and I was going to have some real issues with my musculoskeletal system. And I remember I loved going to the local bakery. He was a traditional baker, organic. I'd buy his sourdough bread, and every now and then on an afternoon I'd go and get these beautiful croissants. And I really remember having a little bit of a fit, saying, these are the foods I want to eat. I want to eat these foods.
A lot of people who, when you first suggest that maybe they're going to have to give up grains, they can't believe that's even possible. What will I do? How will I exist without my cereal in the morning, without my bread on a sandwich? How will I eat a sandwich? That's my favorite one. How will I eat a sandwich? And that's an interesting first pass when it's suggested that you might have to give up these because of the addictive nature of grains and wheat.
So are wheat products addictive? Well, you ask someone to give them up, and you look at the fear in their face. And I know the fear comes from, well, what am I going to cook? What am I going to eat? I think the fear comes from, I really like eating it. Don't take that away from me. That's the one thing that gets me through the day. That's the one thing I look forward to each and every day.
Both casein and gluten can be converted in the liver to a morphine-like derivative. It's called an endorphin. And the casein one is called caseomorphine, and the gluten one's called gluteomorphine. And these substances, yes, morphine, endorphins, they go to the brain and they give a great sense of high. I feel great. That's why they're called highs. And the children like that feeling. They don't know they're addicted. The parents don't know they're addicted, but they've got this craving to have wheat and dairy.
We've got no shortage of calories in our food system. We've got a shortage of nutrients, not a shortage of calories. And so when you have a food that has no nutrients, but it's calorically dense, it's delicious, it triggers the same type of responses in our brain that we would get triggered from a drug, right? So we can actually see food addiction relating to highly palatable, nutrient-deficient foods. And so it makes it a really difficult food to explain how it can be so detrimental to our health because it's delicious.
Giving up wheat doesn't mean you can consume or eat gluten-free packaged foods. When you have a look at these gluten-free packaged foods, they may say they're gluten-free, but you read the ingredients and what you see is a bunch of additives, preservatives and flavouring and all different other carbohydrates and other grains that when they're mixed together, you don't know what they're doing in your body.
Well, the problem with wheat today isn't as simple as just finding gluten-free labeled foods because they're found in our cosmetics, they're found in our pills, medications, they're found as fillers, there's certain sweeteners that are made from wheat. So the problem is that if you are really sensitive to gluten, you're going to be exposed to it unless you're hyper-vigilant.
Have I ever bought a gluten-free product that actually said gluten-free as a substitute? No. Would I? Probably not, because generally they're made up of things that I don't want to be eating anyway. It's difficult because there's so much misinformation out there, and I think people just aren't informed. And then they see a gluten-free packet or a gluten-free aisle and think, okay, that must be better for us because I shouldn't be eating gluten. So then they go for something in a packet that's got all these different starches and binders and fillers and numbers and chemicals.
The problem is when you walk down that aisle, what do you see? gluten-free cake, gluten-free pastries, gluten-free cookies, crackers, bread, make-at-home bread, you name it. While you're gluten-free, you are pounding your body with carbohydrates, and that is wreaking havoc on your gut bacteria, on increasing risk for gut permeability, in amping up inflammation.
The market now identifying water as gluten-free. So on some level, there's a dumbing down of anywhere they can slap the label on any product. It's going to make it sell better, but it's an insult to our intelligence.
You need to be zero gluten because you don't want to stimulate your gluten antibodies. The studies have shown that if you have one bite of bread a day, that's enough to fuel celiac disease and keep it going. You'll never heal at that. We need to nurture these people through their condition. We need to ensure that they remain zero gluten, and we need to make sure that they understand why they are having to be so careful. So I'm not so worried about the gut, I'm worried about the brain.
Now, those of y'all that get a chance to see
America
for them to take something like this here off
the limit
because of some type of copyright, that's just them wanting the rights to the copyright. They want us not knowing the truth.
I disagree with that absolutely. Allowing gluten-free products to be 25 million
so they can continue making
allows manufacturers to cross-contaminate in the factory. They don't have to have a gluten-free facility.
Some people cannot tolerate a microgram of gluten without them setting off an inflammatory response. I'd rather see you go zero gluten. And zero gluten means that you know where each one of your individual ingredients are coming from, and you're making foods from those ingredients. So you're making the foods yourself. You're going back to our culture and tradition, your tradition of being in the kitchen, making beautiful food from scratch.
Back to the basics versus relying on medications. Even a lot of supplements that may have gluten as an excipient may not be as good of an idea as using a culinary herb or taking in a certain type of food. So part of this calls us back to going into more of a natural way of living, a natural way of eating, where you wouldn't even consider consuming all these gluten-free labeled products because you're really making your own food. You're eating whole foods, which are intrinsically gluten-free, vegetables and high-quality, fruits and nuts.
Taking it one step further, the skin is a massive part of the body and it does absorb ingredients. But where I go with that is I'd be going chemical-free. I'd be looking at the same principles and philosophies of going as close to nature as possible. So for me, that's cold-pressed oil. That's using things like essential oils, avoiding the chemicals and anything that has numbers and any chemical components.
When I talk to people that had given up wheat, and I've given it up for quite a long time, you can see this glaze over their eyes, and they're like going, give up wheat? Well, what do I eat now? They have no idea what to eat. They don't know anything different from breakfast cereals. They only know their sandwiches, their muffins, their crackers, and their pasta.
But what am I going to eat, Pete? What's left to eat? Because if I can't have my bread or I can't have my cereal, this is stuff that I've been eating for the last 5 decades, each and every day. Can I tell you a little secret? You have a wonderful world open to you of flavour, of textures, of ingredients. The most blandest food on the face of the planet would have to be grains, or especially wheat. I mean, you think about it. You think about a packet of flour, whether it's wholemeal or white. Taste it. Does that taste delicious to you? I think education is the key, and using yourself as a bit of a guinea pig. I mean, for instance, this documentary is about wheat. I can tell you with all honesty, if you give up wheat, you are not going to die from a deficiency from it.
At one point, my wife just said, hey, why don't you just give up grains? You're writing all this stuff about what's in them. Why don't you just try it yourself for 30 days and see what happens? And it really was that little experiment that I did about 17 years ago, where I gave up grains for 30 days,
And all of a sudden, that IBS that I'd suffered with my entire life, that had literally dictated, how I went about my day, where was the next available bathroom on my route to wherever I was going or wherever I was, that IBS went away. The arthritis in my fingers that I was assuming was a natural artifact of getting older, that went away. I no longer got the gastroesophageal reflux. I never got the heartburn. The sinus issues that would linger after a cold or a flu went away. Imagine how many tens of millions of people are experiencing the same sort of issues and don't really know that it's as a result of food choices, but they assume that it's a natural artifact of their life, of their genetic constitution, of their history of eating, or just a natural artifact of getting older.
What I've found working with hundreds of people is if they eliminate wheat, they start to see an improvement in whatever health issues, either acute or chronic, that they're dealing with.
And there's nothing in medicine that is as dramatic, except maybe antibiotics for an infection, as eliminating an allergic trigger that is crippling an individual.
And now I switched to only organic food and personal care products. That's when the magic began. And that's when I, in the course of a year, would go from a reclining wheelchair to biking 20 miles with my family. I'm so grateful for those years in the wheelchair, because without the 4 years in the wheelchair, I would not have learned all of this. And I would still be thinking that drugs and surgeries would be how we're going to create health for our country. And that could not be farther from the truth. Drugs and surgeries will not create health for the U.S. or any westernized country or for the world. We have to go back to diet and lifestyle. We have to go back to eating this radical thing known as vegetables, lots of them, sufficient protein, not lots of protein, sufficient protein. And we need to move our bodies. We need to have a meditative practice, a supportive social network, and hopefully a loving family. That is how we create health. That's how we control healthcare costs. That's how we defeat chronic disease.
Hello, this is Pegasus Lifestyle Management. How can I help? Thank you, sir. Your spectacular aircraft is now ready for you at our nearest airfield.
Give it a go. Let's say you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. You can't do a test for it. All you can do is eliminate. So give yourself 6 weeks to eliminate wheat. But do it with real foods.
Well, being a chef, I think I had a little bit of an advantage to adopt this lifestyle to make it delicious. Because that's the key. With any dietary change, you don't want to be eating cardboard. You really want to be eating really delicious food. And we found that the transition for the children, especially our kids, we actually really didn't need to tell them anything. I just cooked food that was devoid of the ingredients that can cause problems for our children and for ourselves. We didn't make a big song and dance about it.
It becomes really important to change the conversation, not away from what we're eliminating, but from what we're adding. What other amazing, tasty, flavorful, nutrient-dense foods we can eat in place of wheat.
The first week or two, they may feel worse because they are now up regulating the enzymes that process and eliminate toxins, and they're experiencing what we call detoxification. They may have more headache, more fatigue. The women are coming in, Doc, I'm losing weight, I'm not hungry, I feel great. So they're very happy about body image. The guys, on the other hand, are coming in like, Doc, you didn't tell me my love life was going to improve. I am so happy.
So how long it takes to recover from an exposure can vary dramatically. The cells that are responsible for the reaction can live anywhere between 2 months, 10 months, 2 days. The cells that calm everything down and turn off that reaction, if they're not working properly, you're going to be on the 10-month side.
If you have been consuming wheat your whole life and that intestinal wall has been constantly challenged, it's constantly inflamed and it's permeable, just eliminating the offending substance could in theory start generating a healing response within a matter of a few days or a week. You really wouldn't know until you stop consuming it. And many of us who have done that have been just shocked by how profound the changes how quickly they have occurred, as well as when they reintroduce even a small amount of that substance, just what a acute reaction they get.
So you'll often hear people say, you know, I ate bread every day of my life and I never had these kinds of reactions to it. And it's sort of a common response that people will think that, you know, going gluten-free for a month made them gluten intolerant. And that's not the case. It allowed them to see what was already there. So you have these exaggerated response, which makes it really, really obvious. And it makes it really, really easy to identify which food was the problem.
Not everybody will have an issue with weight. It just seems that the majority of the population is beginning to have a problem with weight. So, will I be able to eat wheat again? Do I need to do this elimination? Is there an alternative? We do not have the science to say, yes, you can eat wheat again, or no, you shouldn't be eating wheat again. It is about you figuring out what is the best thing for you.
Some people are able to eat wheat again, and some people are not.
With a food intolerance, many people will find that eventually they can start to reintroduce that food into their diet successfully because you've actually allowed enough time to pass for all of the cells, not just the ones that are controlling the reaction, but the ones that are responsible for the reaction, to die off. And it's why food intolerances are such a dynamic system.
If I were to choose to eat a type of wheat product, I would probably choose something like sourdough rye and would really look for traditional, organically grown. And I think my body would probably end up being okay at some point, or at least, you know, help me to maintain my health better than if it was another form.
We need to go back to the old-fashioned wheats, the einkorn, the emmer wheats that haven't been manipulated. We need to raise them organically without Roundup, without all these chemicals. And then we need to grind them fresh and make a genuine sourdough bread.
If we go back to the ancient grains, the ones that originated, we may find that more people can tolerate these. The philosophical question is, why do you even want to do that when you have meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables of all kinds, and fruit, which are providing a ton more nutrition on a calorie-per-calorie basis.
If more and more people start to eat nutrient-dense foods, then they probably don't need to eat as much of it. If we start to treat the land holistically and work with nature, then potentially we do not need as many wheat fields, cornfields, sugar fields as we currently have. I mean, we use a lot of the land for ingredients that really aren't causing us to have great health.
So let's start taking care of it properly, and let's start getting back to the older ways which sustained us and got us here.
Because you don't have to come back from a rotten toxic route. You just have to abandon it. And abandoning toxics is a very simple gesture of recognizing that ecological agriculture is totally possible, that we can renew the fertility of our soils by giving back to the earth the organic matter that she has given us, and she will sustain us forever into the future. If we have to have a future as humanity, it's time to bring life back into the equation, and with it, the knowledge that comes through culture, because only culture teaches us that life is precious.
Wheat isn't the problem, it's what we've done to wheat that's the problem. And I feel we need to go back to our old ways of having a veggie garden in the backyard so we know where our food is coming from. Or follow the town of Todmorden, which is an edible town where they grow food trees and food instead of food trees and flowers. And if we start going back to our traditional ways and we start taking an interest in how our food is produced, then perhaps we can stop this onslaught of illness that we're now seeing in our children and our adult population.
Every disease that exists on the planet is a man-made creation. Nature has not created those diseases. We have created them. And that's a wonderful news, because we have the power to reverse them.
I'm very optimistic that a large part of the public is going to understand that we will not be able to medicate or operate our way back to health. The only way to get health and vitality is to go back to what really caused us to become ill in the first place, which was our diet and lifestyle choices.
The food that we eat is sending signals to our DNA, our code of life. And we can either choose to send signals that code for health or signals that code for disease. Our genetic code hasn't changed, and it's expecting that information from the foods that we've been eating for a long, long time. And again, modern agriculture has suddenly given us genetic information that our bodies just don't know how to handle.
What impact are we having on the next generation as a result of the food choices that we're making right now? And to see the light go on and go, wow, this is not just today, but I can see that I can improve for the next few decades. And that probably the best of all is that this is a very sustainable way of eating. It's not a diet, it's a way of eating. And it is incredibly satisfying and clearly sustainable for the rest of my life.
So eat the way our ancestors ate. And there is really no other solution. I know that you might need other health modalities to get back to health, but without starting with the right diet, nothing else is going to work.
We're creating a weaker and weaker species, and are we going to do something about it? I know I want to. I know you want to. I know parents watching this want to. You know, I believe we can turn this around.
Use what you have where you have. Blossom where you are. Sprout where you are. And then keep your eyes open and start making collaborations and talking to this and that and the other.
Be gentle with the skin. Be gentle with the body. It's taken a lot to bombard it. We've hurt the skin. We've hurt the body. Let's get back and start nurturing in the way nature intended. Be kind.
One of the biggest roadblocks that we face to change is that we as an entire society have forgotten what it feels like to be healthy.
The reason behind the education with What's with Wheat and this documentary is to get you to ask more questions, to be more aware, to understand what's happening out there, to take an active role in how your food is produced. We can't change with the thinking that's got us into this predicament. We must change with a different type of thinking. Become educated, become knowledgeable, become aware, start making changes step by step, habit by habit, and we may be able to create a tsunami of change that will change the health of our children and future generations.
Yeah, y'all heard it, yo. Fucking that's one of them. I'm about to put another one on. Fuck all this bullshit. I don't give a damn if they let out there and go with just copyright bullshit because they don't want nobody to know what the fucking truth is. But like I say again, can't stop, won't stop. Stop me, motherfucker. All y'all can do is stop my broadcast because I ain't doing nothing but helping people live there and listen to some shit. Why they play this bullshit on the Grand Theft Auto. Nah. This one here you can go check out. It's called What the Hell? Let's see if we can start this from the beginning. I think we was into this one here. Alright, here we go. I say I ain't giving nobody a movie away or nothing. I'm informing motherfuckers that ain't informed and can't afford to get fucking Netflix or YouTube. You funky bitches. Just because a person don't got no fucking money, you don't want to know no motherfucking knowledge, you stanky whores. But I love you though. And that's the truth. I don't let you get to me that far. I let you do what you do. But that is it. I control what goes on in his heart. I never stop love. because I don't ever hate. Why? What's the reason for it? What is the reason for it? So, let's get back to the show. It is what it is. It do what it do. About to go back out. Because I see right now what we got to do. Got to buy some gun. See, where our money in. Appropriate. See what our money is. Appropriate $100. Now we're cool with that. Hold on, see something. These niggas ain't dialing. And I know both of y'all, hope y'all ain't dialing. Well, y'all two should know each other. I could eat me a salad. I know you put this body. Started doing already. Fucking more shit. Ain't that cool? We ain't gonna get no volume, y'all.
1 in 3 Medicare dollars is spent in the care of people with diabetes. 1 in 10 total healthcare dollars is spent on people with diabetes. There's no question that this is a major problem.
What in particular is the correlation with the diet and diabetes?
I'm not going to get into that.
Into diet?
No.
My name's Kib. I'm a filmmaker from San Francisco and I have a confession to make. I'm covering hypochondriac. Like so many of us, I have a family history of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. My dad had his first heart bypass at 49, his second at age 50. My grandpa died young from diabetes
diabetes complications, and both my other grandpa and grandma died of cancer. I was always paranoid that I would also get one of these diseases. Like any good hypochondriac, WebM The symptoms checker was essentially my browser's homepage. Even in my teens, I took Metamucil every day and a daily aspirin. I read all the latest self-diagnosis books. I ate every multivitamin I could get my hands on, and I was obsessed with bodily functions. I followed all the large health organizations' recommendations for preventing disease. I exercise regularly, don't smoke, don't drink soda, get enough sleep, reduce stress, and grew up eating.
She look like a jamming my signal. Oh shit. I gotta look good on my show. I'm gonna play some more music so I don't hear that bullshit. people. You know, we still rolling. Shit, I just said, this is my documentary. I'm gonna talk about my shit. I ain't gonna be dead talking about my shit. I'm gonna talk about my shit while I'm alive telling my shit. Hold your horse, son. At the gym, yo. Like I said again, just don't want nobody knowing the truth. Fucked up, man. You got a good deal in there. Ain't no cars out there. I know they try too stupid to get the mission done. But I already know we gonna die again. You want anything that did that bad boy head first. How can you survive? Get help, y'all. Y'all can bullshit. too, because I ain't even dress them. I ain't even had that many fish. What's y'all? If he can barely get on these suckers. Hello? The bad boys, low. I'm about to come back to that session anyway. I was trying to help you to get the damn swap out the van, and they can't do that. I don't like to stop nothing if I help them. If I start something, I like to finish with it. So I guess you and my boy ain't there transporting shit, huh? Internet.
Merriweather Security Consulting. Don't hesitate to call back. I don't even get a chance to get that dead. Bring my show back to the place where it was working the best. Oh, you son of a bitch. Huh? Did you get that on what I sent you the other day?
What I thought was a healthy diet until...
World Health Organization this morning has classified processed meat such as bacon and sausage as carcinogenic, directly involved in causing cancer in humans.
Processed meat is clearly linked to an increase in cancer. Hot dogs or bacon could be just as dangerous as smoking cigarettes.
The World Health Organization had looked at over 800 studies from 10 different countries, finding a direct link to consuming processed meat and cancer. Just one serving of deli meats daily increases your risks of colorectal cancer by 18%. I had no idea that what we ate affected cancer rates, But I never felt like I had eaten a lot of processed meats until I realized that processed meat includes hot dogs, bacon, sausage, salami, ham, pepperoni, cold cuts, and deli slices. Basically everything I grew up eating. The World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same group as cigarettes, asbestos, and plutonium, and classifies red meat as a Group 2 carcinogen. Was this like I had essentially been smoking my entire childhood? If processed meats are labeled the same as cigarettes, how is it even legal for kids to be eating this way? I thought this was new information, but many of these studies have been around for 50 years. I couldn't believe I'd been eating processed meats virtually my entire life and was just now finding out how dangerous they are. Why hadn't I been hearing about it from the American Cancer Society, the largest cancer group in the nation? When I went on their website, I was shocked to see that none of this information was featured on their homepage. But even more shocking, on their Eat Healthy page, they actually encouraged eating Group 1 carcinogenic foods like processed turkey and canned meats. This is after the World Health Organization reviewed over 800 studies definitively linking processed meat to cancer.
Thank you for calling the American Cancer Society. My name is Sam. I'm a cancer information specialist. How may I help you today?
Hi, I was calling because I was wondering why you all recommend people to eat processed meat on your website, which the World Health Organization has classified as a Group 1 carcinogen, which is in the same class as tobacco smoking, asbestos, and plutonium. This would be like a lung association having a how to roll your own cigarette section on their website. It's kind of the same thing.
Well, let me just place you on a brief hold because
He wasn't able to answer my questions and said someone would get back with me. I had always been concerned about cancer because both my grandma and grandpa died of cancer. I wondered if things would have been different had they known the link between diet and this terrible disease. In the U.S., 1 out of every 4 deaths is from cancer. Oh, sweet. American Cancer Society rep confirmed an interview this week. So we just went in for the interview with the American Cancer Society rep, and the security guard said there's no interview scheduled. So I went into my phone, and it turns out last night, after I told her that the interview is going to be about the correlation between diet and cancer, she said she could no longer do the interview. After repeated emails asking why she was declining my interview to simply talk about diet and cancer, she stopped responding altogether. Why would an American Cancer Society rep not want to talk about this? I was, however, able to connect with a growing movement of doctors who are willing to talk about the link between the standard American diet and disease. And it goes beyond just cancer. I took my old trusty van, Super Blue, once again out on the road.
2/3 of adults are now overweight or obese, and we have an epidemic cascade of debilitating disease that's overcoming the country. There's no way we can sustain the current style of care with the epidemic that we're creating with our diet and lifestyle choices.
The diabetes, the arthritis, the heart disease, the dementia, the obesity, the cancers are affecting about 70% of deaths. All the data is that those 70% of deaths and morbidity are largely lifestyle related and preventable.
Most kids by age 10 in the U.S. already have fatty streaks in their arteries, the first stage of atherosclerosis leading to heart attacks, strokes.
Here in American medicine, we operate from the disease model. We are in the business of treating sick people. We are not in the business of trying to prevent people from becoming sick.
When you look at chronic disease risk, all the things that we walk around worrying about, actually dietary choices trump smoking when it comes to those risks.
If I could deliver one message to the researchers who are looking for the cause of diabetes and the cause of clogged arteries and the cause of high blood pressure and the cause of obesity, I would tell them the answer is in 3 words. It's the food. It's what Americans are eating.
Today, with 2/3 of Americans being overweight, clearly there's a food issue. In the next 25 years, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have diabetes.
My name's Michael Abdallah. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and unfortunately I was diagnosed about 10 years ago with diabetes, and 8 years ago I had 2 stents put in. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. You're just like out of options, and you don't know what to do. You're taking medicine. You listen to this doctor, and the cardiologist says take this, and the and the endocrinologist says take that, then your general practitioner doctor says you don't know what's going on here, and it's a real challenging thing, and it's something that you don't want to get it. You just don't want to get it.
Government and media almost exclusively blame lack of exercise and sugary foods as a cause of diabetes, but I wanted to talk with an actual expert on the role of diet and diabetes. I went to speak with premier physician, diabetes expert, and researcher Dr. Neil Barnard. What role does sugar play in causing diabetes?
Drives me crazy. Diabetes is not and never was caused by eating a high carbohydrate diet, and it's not caused by eating sugar. The cause of diabetes is a diet that builds up the amount of fat into the blood. I'm talking about a typical meat-based, animal-based diet. You can look into the muscle cells of the human body, and you find that they're building up tiny particles of fat that's causing insulin resistance. What that means is the sugar that is naturally from the foods that you're eating can't get into the cells where it belongs. It builds up in the blood, and that's diabetes.
I had never heard that meat was associated with causing diabetes. We had always been told that sugar or obesity caused it. Renowned weight loss bariatric surgeon Dr. Garth Davis, though, agreed.
Everyone thinks that you get diabetic because of carbs. They did a huge study in that EPIC study, 500,000 people. Carbs consumption was inversely related with diabetes. In other words, the more carbs someone ate, the less diabetes they had. But meat was strongly correlated. Get that aha moment. The starches, the carbs are good for you. They're not bad for you. This idea that carbs make you fat is utterly ridiculous. Carbs cannot make you fat in and of themselves. We have storage in our muscles and in our liver for carbs called glycogen. So when we eat carbs, we either store it or we burn it. Now, eat fat, that goes straight to your fat. Your body can't turn those carbs into fat unless you're really overdoing the calories. Obesity, it's a death sentence. You're at much higher risk of getting cancer. You're almost certainly going to get diabetes. I mean, no one wants to fat shame, and we all want everybody to be comfortable with our bodies, but this movement to be comfortable with our bodies has made us comfortable with being sick, and that's a huge problem. I go into the hospital, and I look around me, people on dialysis, all these sick people, and just about every disease in there is because of what people are eating.
Here's the thing. If I eat a sugary cookie, the sugar lures you in like the Trojan horse, but waiting inside that cookie is a huge load of butter or shortening, and that's what fattens you up, and that's the part that leads to the diabetes. It's the fatty foods, not really so much the sugar.
It's not that sugar is good for you. There's no nutrients in it. It's excess calories. But when you eat sugar, you don't get inflammation right away. When you eat sugar, you're not getting plaques forming in your vessels. When you're eating sugar, your body's going to store most of it as glycogen or burn it as calories. And so this focus on sugar has taken all the focus off meat, dairy, eggs, pork, turkey, chicken.
People need to understand, if their child gets diabetes, you've just taken 19 years off their lifespan. We're talking life and death.
I realized there was so much more about diet and disease that I hadn't ever learned. It felt as if this information had been practically withheld. Processed meat causes cancer. Sugar doesn't cause diabetes. I had doubt about the claims these doctors were making, so I did some searching on my own. Harvard researchers looked at 9 prospective studies finding that just one serving of processed meat per day increased risk of developing diabetes by 51%. The link between eating meat and developing diabetes became undeniable. But when I went on the leading diabetes organization's website, the American Diabetes Association, not only did they not have this information front and center, they were featuring recipes for red and processed meat. And on their recipes for healthy living, they had bacon-wrapped shrimp? What the hell? All right, send an email to American Diabetes Association, see if they'll get back to us. As destructive as diabetes is, it pales in comparison to heart disease. Over 17 million people die every year from cardiovascular disease. It is the leading cause of death around the world. Nearly 1 out of every 3 people will die from this disease. The amount of people who die from cardiovascular disease is the equivalent of 4 jumbo jets crashing every single hour, every single day, every single year.
My name is Amy Resnick, and I'm from Swampscott, Massachusetts, a little bit north of Boston. And I recently went to my doctor for asthma because I had a very hard time breathing. And while there, she did some blood work, and one of the tests was C-reactive protein. And on a scale there was a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being low for cardiac event, 3 being high for cardiac event, and my number was 10.82.
What does that mean?
That means I am on the road for a heart attack, and she said probably within the next 30 days.
30 days?
30 days, if I'm going the way I was going. I take this for my heart arrhythmia, take this for pain, oxycodone for pain, and lorazepam for stress, cyclobenzaprine for muscle relaxer, also take Topamax and Prozac, and I also use a CPAP machine to help me breathe, and my asthma has been so bad this past year, I use it during the day as well to get some air. I am tired when I wake up. I'm tired during the day. I take a nap. I'm still tired. I can't breathe. And I know I need to make a change for my health, or else I'm not going to be here for my family.
When we speak of heart disease, I would say the role of alcohol is pretty small. The role of sugar is very small too. Smoking is big, but the good news is that most people have quit or never did smoke. The problem with animal-based diet, its contribution to heart disease is huge, and it is pervasive.
All this expensive imaging, procedures, bypasses, medication, none of which has one solitary single thing to do with the causation of the illness. So you die of a completely benign, foodborne illness that never had its causation treated.
When we eat these kind of dead meat bacteria toxins, within minutes, you get this burst of inflammation within your system, such that you basically paralyze your arteries. You get this stiffening of the arteries, their inability to relax normally in half. So it's not like decades down the road eating unhealthy, there'll be some damage. No, we're talking damage right then and there, within minutes of it going into our mouth.
Many people are given the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease when it's not true Alzheimer's at all. The vast majority of people suffer dementia due to their tiny blood vessels in their brain clogging up and their nerve cells being shortchanged of oxygenated blood. And guess where that blood vessel dementia comes from? Those little tiny arteries are clogging up from that steady stream of fat, cholesterol, etc.
It's really quite clear from the standpoint of cancer and the standpoint of cardiovascular disease that animal protein plays an enormous role.
Is chicken better?
It's a question of whether you want to be shot or hung.
The flesh food that I would eliminate from the American diet would be poultry, would be turkey and chicken. A brilliant advertising campaign has convinced people that, oh, it's white meat, it's healthier.
The leading source of sodium in the American diet for adult is chicken. It can be labeled all natural chicken, but be injected with the salt water, having up to 800 milligrams of sodium.
Heterocyclic amines are clear-cut carcinogens, and they can form in any kind of meat as it's heated, as it's cooked. But by far the biggest source is chicken. We sent researchers into fast food and family restaurants. Not only were there carcinogens in every single restaurant, but we found them in every single chicken sample that we took. If somebody brings their family in and they're buying a bucket of chicken, nobody tells them that there are carcinogens. If you're selling carcinogens to people, you've got to warn them that they're in there.
But the American Cancer Society encourages people to switch from red and processed meat to chicken. Why would the American Cancer Society tell people to switch from eating one carcinogenic food to another when a Harvard University study showed that men with prostate cancer who eat large amounts of chicken increase their risk of the disease progressing 4 times?
The number one dietary source in America of cholesterol is chicken because of the volume of chicken. You know, chicken's become grilled chicken and organic chicken. It's machismo, but it has nearly as much cholesterol per gram as red beef. So just on sheer volume, it's the number one source. Yeah, eggs being close behind.
I never really thought about eggs much. I just thought of them as a standard part of a healthy diet. But then I found a study suggesting that eating just 1 egg a day can be as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes per day for life expectancy.
The yolk of a hen's egg is the most concentrated gram of saturated fat and cholesterol. It is made to run a baby chicken for 21 days with no outside energy. It is pure fat and cholesterol. And when we put that into our bloodstream, it coats our red blood cells. Our blood gets thicker and more viscous. It changes our hormone levels. It raises our cholesterol levels. There's nothing healthy about eating the yolk of the egg.
But I thought cholesterol and saturated fat wasn't an issue anymore.
You know, these saturated fat studies that have come out trying to vindicate saturated fat, there's a campaign by the dairy industry, right? Number one source of saturated fat is dairy. It's not meat. 2008, the global dairy industry got together at a meeting and explicitly, read their agenda, was to neutralize the negative impact of milk fat by regulators and medical professionals, unquote. So what did they do? They funded studies.
The main study that started the whole saturated fat media craze was funded by the National Dairy Council. The egg industry similarly funds studies that confuse consumers by making claims that eggs don't negatively affect heart function. That is, only when compared to eating a McDonald's sausage McMuffin. So what they're really saying is that eating eggs is just as bad as eating a McMuffin.
When you eat foods like beef or steak or a processed meat, a hot dog, you're not just getting saturated fat. You're also getting other additional toxins that are in that food. There's heme iron, carcinogens, processing chemicals. This is all a lot more complicated than just looking at saturated fat.
You know, the strategy is not on making their products any safer. The strategy is to just try to confuse the public, to introduce doubt. You know, there's a famous tobacco industry memo. It's called Doubt is Our Product. That's all they had to do. They didn't have to convince Americans that smoking was healthy, right? They just had to introduce doubt. Then they would win. If there's just enough controversy, people kind of throw up their hands. I don't know what to eat. Confusion is their game.
I really don't think people thought what they ate led to heart disease. They think, oh, it's genetic, my parents had it. I don't think people really think that what they ate led to diabetes. I think, oh, my parents had it, I was going to get it. And certainly cancer, they don't think that way.
People have bad lifestyles that they've inherited environmentally. They've been exposed to a certain way of eating and living that they've carried on into their adulthood, passed on to their children. That is why they go on to develop the same diseases that their parents and grandparents may have had before them. But it is not inevitable.
Even if you have a genetic predisposition, doesn't mean it's going to necessarily manifest. And what determines whether it manifests or not may be those epigenetic variables, the things that you can control, the environmental factors, the dietary factors, the lifestyle factors.
So we can actually change the expression of genes, tumor-suppressing genes, tumor-activating genes, by what we eat, what we put into our body. So, you know, even if you've been dealt a bad genetic deck, you can still reshuffle it with diet.
I had always thought that I would develop heart disease at a young age because both my dad and grandpa had heart attacks. I was taught that they were genetic, but their heart attacks probably had less to do with genes and more to do with their diets high in meat. That's why when I went on the American Heart Association's Heart Healthy Recipes page, I could not believe they had an entire section on beef recipes. This was just like the American Cancer Society encouraging eating Group 1 carcinogens on their site.
Meatloaf, pork loin, steak on your recipe list? Are you kidding me? It's like this menu is trying to give people heart attacks. At your website, we noticed Heart Healthy Recipes, and we were kind of bewildered by why there's a bunch of recipes on, a whole section on beef recipes, and there's also a section on egg recipes when there's such a strong link between beef, red meat, and heart disease.
I honestly don't know because I don't do that, I guess. That's not what I do.
Another organization rep that wasn't able to answer my questions, but he said that he'd have someone get in touch shortly. I was, however, able to talk to the president of the American College of Cardiology, Dr. Kim Williams.
Well, the American College of Cardiology is a 47,000-member and growing organization with a dedicated mission to reduce heart disease and to improve patients' lives. And if you look at the incidence of hypertension and diabetes and mortality in men, they actually get reduced as you go higher and higher in terms of how much you restrict animal products.
What about fish?
So fish is a little different. You've got the 4 worries, which is PCBs, mercury, saturated fat, and cholesterol. And the cholesterol is all over the place. You can hit tuna and water, that'll be almost less than a glass of milk, to salmon or tilapia, which is higher than a pork chop.
If you look objectively at fish, what you find is they've become essentially mercury sponges. And that's why in many parts of the country they warn you, don't have more than so many of these fish a week because it's getting too much mercury can kill you.
Fish are eaten by bigger fish who are eaten by bigger fish, and these pesticides and herbicides bioaccumulate in the fish flesh. And these big fish, including the salmon, which people think is the healthiest fish, truth is the amount of pesticides and herbicides in the flesh of these fish are shocking, and they have estrogenic and cancer-promoting properties in them.
They'll say, well, but don't sardines have less concentration of toxic waste product than other ones? Something being less toxic doesn't make it healthy. It just makes it less toxic.
Farmed fish is by no means healthier than all the antibiotics that these animals have to be fed, similar to chickens and turkeys kept in confinement. These fish get infections. They get fungal infections. They get bacterial infections. You've got to feed them antifungals, antibiotics, and these substances accumulate in the fish flesh as well.
I always knew that pollution was bad for our health, but I had never thought about the environmental pollutants affecting food.
Dioxins, being the most toxic man-made chemicals known to science, cause all sorts of things. They cause endometriosis, they cause cancers, they cause endocrine disruption problems. Most of your exposure, 93% of it, comes from eating meat and dairy products because it climbs up in the food chain so effectively. So you can get exposed to living near these incinerators and breathing it, but it'll take you 14 years to breathe in as much dioxin as a cow will ingest by eating the grass in one day. And that dioxin will accumulate in its fat, which includes the milk and the meat, and anyone eating meat or dairy products is going to get that dose of dioxin, so it climbs up the food chain every step. Men have no way in their bodies to get rid of dioxins, but women have two ways. They're both involving having a baby. One is that dioxin crosses the placenta into the growing infant, and the other is that it comes out from the breast milk. So if you have a meat and dairy consuming mother breastfeeding that infant, then the highest impacts of toxic exposure like mercury and dioxins will go to that infant.
Pregnant women are told certain types of fish should be avoided. But what about all these other animal products which are introducing, imagine as the fetus is developing, introducing these very harmful toxins which create reproductive abnormalities, developmental problems, and hormonal issues right as the child is developing in this critical stage of development.
It does make you worry when people say, don't you want to have a little bit of milk because you're pregnant? Don't you want to have some fish because you're pregnant? Who do you think is going to get the chemicals that are in that?
All these environmental toxins and toxins from the feed that they're being fed accumulate in their tissues and are released into the mother and unfortunately to the child when you eat these products when you're pregnant. So this includes antibiotics, hormones, steroids in animal feed. Commercial animals are largely fed GMO corn and soy, which are very laden in pesticides. PCBs have been banned since the 70s, but they persist in the environment. Dioxins, all of these compounds can create hormonal, reproductive, developmental damage as well.
Eating organic beef, poultry, pork, or fish will not help you avoid contaminants like mercury, like dioxins, like strontium-90, because they fall out over all sorts of farm fields and water bodies, and they don't skip over the organic fields. So really the contaminants are coming in regardless of how these animals are raised.
I had always been concerned about the possible health impacts of GMOs, but then found out that most of the world's GMO crops are actually consumed by livestock, with dairy cows consuming the most per animal. This fact, with everything I'd learned about bioaccumulation, made dairy terrifying, especially considering how much cheese I ate in my life.
Cheese is an amazing product when you think about it. It's probably one of the single best foods at compromising health that you're going to actually feed to people. Think about it. You've got an animal product. So you've got all the issues of biological concentration. You have a highly processed food product. And not only does it have naturally a lot of saturated fat, but you put a lot of salt into it.
There's a strong link between dairy foods and autoimmune diseases. And so that can show itself up as excessive production of mucus and exacerbation of asthma in kids who are prone to that, and even adults. And also there's an association between dairy foods and multiple sclerosis and type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, and other rheumatologic problems.
Cow's milk is baby calf growth fluid. That's what this stuff is. There's absolutely no child or human on earth who actually needs the milk of a cow any more than they need the milk of a giraffe or a mouse.
Most people in the world are lactose intolerant. I mean, that's the normal state of affairs. Why would your body create this enzyme to digest lactose after weaning, after infancy? It doesn't make any sense.
Hello, you're through to Pegasus Lifestyle Management. How can I help?
95% of Asians.
Thank you, sir. Your spectacular aircraft is now ready for you at our nearest airfield.
Hispanic Americans are lactose intolerant. Our government is encouraging Americans of color to eat foods that it knows is going to make them ill. Ultimately, what that boils down to is the government is telling me as an African American to eat food that's going to make me ill for no health benefit so that it will benefit dairy farmers as a form of institutionalized racism?
Yeah, milk is a risky food for human consumption. As a pediatrician, I see on a daily basis children suffering from conditions that are linked or associated to dairy consumption, such as eczema, acne, constipation, acid reflux, iron deficiency, anemia. Cow's milk protein is the most allergenic food.
People think, well, no, I want hormone-free, not injected with bovine growth hormone. But milk is this hormonal fluid, so it's just packed with sex hormones and natural sex steroid hormones like estrogen, progesterone. In fact, doesn't matter if it's conventional milk, doesn't matter if it's organic milk. Milk without hormones, it's an oxymoron. Organic dairy has just as much saturated fat and cholesterol and galactose and all the things that you don't want as conventional dairy.
Dairy products in general have a lot of other products associated with it, not the least of which is pus. I mean, they actually have laws limiting how much pus you can actually have in the milk and still sell it. I believe it's like 750,000 pus cells per cc. Because, I mean, you wouldn't want too much pus. It would be like pure pus. People might object. In fact, you could think of cheese as kind of coagulated cow pus, if you will.
But I was always told that we need milk for strong bones.
I'm Jane Chapman, and not too long ago, finally got some x-rays of the hips and back. Severe bilateral osteoarthritis of the hips. And actually, I'm scheduled for 2 hip replacements. That's bone on bone. It's the grinding of the joints. My stability is scary. I hold on to the walls if I'm at home. I've been told to use a walker. I'm only 61. This is not how you're supposed to live when you're this old. I have a really hard time believing that that's all that's left.
Researchers have studied bone development in kids and whether they get stress fractures and that kind of thing. And the kids who drink the most milk have zero protection. Milk does not build strong bones. Harvard researchers have looked at a large group of older women. Over an 18-year period, the milk drinkers had zero protection from fractures. So this old notion that somehow milk is going to build strong bones or protect your bones later in life, it's a myth.
People that drink milk have higher rates of hip fractures, have more cancer, and live shorter lives.
Turns out that countries with the highest dairy consumption also have the highest rates of osteoporosis. So clearly, drinking more milk doesn't protect your bones. Doing more research, I found that dairy was linked to many different types of cancer as well. Just like many of us, I thought that the majority of cancer was due to genes, but only 5 to 10% of cancer is actually genetic.
Any cancer is caused by a DNA mutation, but that's not enough. So that can cause that first cancer cell, but 1 cancer cell never killed anyone. 2 cancer cells never killed anyone. But 1 billion cancer cells, now we're running into problems. So we need to reduce the growth factors in our body, like IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is this cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in every stage of cancer cell growth and spread and metastases. Any animal protein boosts the level of IGF-1.
Dairy products increases your risk for various forms of cancer, especially those related to your hormones. So breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. So this is not a product, even in its most pure state, you want to be consuming because it does come with risk.
I found out that dairy can increase a man's chance of getting prostate cancer by 34%. And for women who've had breast cancer, just 1 serving of whole dairy a day can increase their chance of dying from the disease 49%, and dying from anything 64%. Why weren't breast cancer sites like Susan G. Komen warning everyone about this?
For calling Susan G. Komen, this is Jocelyn. How may I help you?
Okay, so we're wondering why you don't have a huge warning about the dangers of consuming dairy on your website when there's a direct link to breast cancer. There was a study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute that found out women consuming dairy who has had breast cancer increases their risk of dying of breast cancer 49%. I was wondering why it's not on your website.
We cannot answer these types of questions.
Once again, another health organization rep saying someone else would have to answer my question. Rather than risk being stood up again, I went straight to the local Susan G. Komen chapter to see if they would answer my questions. They didn't want to answer my questions in person either, and told us to stop filming, but promised they would connect me to the national office directly. Susan G. Komen's Pink Ribbon campaign had done a lot to raise awareness for breast cancer, although it was confusing to see pink ribbons on dairy yogurt containers.
Breast cancer can be prevented with a healthy diet and lifestyle, but we're not. We're talking about pink ribbons and putting all the money into research for the cure. I, for one, know that I would want my daughter, my mother, me, I want to focus on not getting to that point, and that's where I would like to see more energy and effort put.
I had been a hardcore cheeseaholic virtually my entire life, despite the risks, but like so many others, I seem to have been addicted to it.
It turns out that the casein protein, that's the main protein in dairy products, and particularly in cheese, it breaks apart in the human digestion to create what are called casomorphins, casein-derived morphine-like compounds that go to the brain, and they attach to the very same receptor that heroin attaches to. Don't get me wrong. They're not as strong as that, but they are strong enough to make you come back again and again and again, despite the fact that you're gaining weight, you're more unhealthy than you've ever been, but that cheese just calls out to people.
Casomorphin may play a role in SIDS and sudden infant death syndrome, may play a role in autism. This is one of the reasons why we don't want infants drinking milk from cows.
Human breast milk has 2.7 grams of casein per liter, compared to 26 grams per liter for cow's milk. That's practically 10
There's one on its way to you
more.
now.
No wonder it's so addictive. This talk about addiction made me think about all the drugs animals are fed. I went to the headquarters of the Center for Food and Safety, the nation's leading FDA government watchdog group, to see how concerned we need to be about drugs in our food.
So that we know of, there are at least 450 different drugs that are administered to animals, either alone or in combination. These drugs are given to animals for a variety of reasons, very, very few of which are actually beneficial to consumer health.
We've got drug companies that work real hard to make sure they can sell lots of drugs to people raising cows, pigs, and chickens.
The pharmaceutical industry sells 80% of all the antibiotics that it makes in the United States to animal agriculture. Antibiotic residues are found in meat. Other antimicrobials are found in meat. There has been ractopamine found in meat. There's been hormones found in meat. So right there, you're talking about 4 different drugs that could be, in the same piece of meat. The pharmaceutical company is supposed to show the safety of animal drugs. They're not really testing to see what the impacts of these drugs are on humans. They're really looking to see what the impacts of these drugs are on animals.
When we try to get information on some of the health studies and the environmental studies from federal agencies, we get back page after page of blacked out information because the company claimed confidential business information.
Consumers have no idea what is in the products that they consume.
So how sick something makes me and how bad it pollutes the environment is a secret for a company.
In the animal agriculture industry, as in the tobacco industry, these companies really have a vested interest in making sure that the public doesn't have information about their effects and what risks are really posed to consuming them.
Have this system where animals are living in their own waste. They're living next to animals that are sick or even dead, and they're stuck in cages with these animals. The bacteria tends to spread, that the pathogens that are being created in these filthy conditions are breeding resistance to antibiotics, and the public are becoming exposed to those.
We already have people dying from salmonella and other things that you eat. We have about 3,000 people die every year in the United States. That's more than the number of people that were killed in 9/11 in the Twin Towers in New York. If we had some terrorist organization killing 3,000 people a year, we would be all over it. The antibiotic-resistant bacteria deaths that we have, on top of that, you get 20,000 people dying a year. That's 7 9/11s every year. Can you imagine if that many people were being killed by some terrorist group in the United States every year? We would find them.
The World Health Organization has said we're nearing a post-antibiotic era in medicine. You'll be at risk in minor surgery to have a fatal infection. You'll be at risk going to the dentist if you have a tooth extracted. Or it'll be like Civil War medicine. You get an infection in your leg and you cut your leg off. So you have this very dangerous situation. By crowding these animals in, they become a perfect engine for generating a new flu virus that can come out into the community. If you lived near a swine spray field, not even the CAFO, but the waste disposal field, you were 3 times more likely to have a MRSA infection. You can't see how that impacts the average person's life in DuPont County, North Carolina, and not be a little upset about it.
From an environmental standpoint, from a community standpoint, from all other aspects,
North Carolina, we're in a state of emergency. We've already had bouts of swine flu, or H1N1 as they prefer to refer to it. That particular swine flu incident was originated on a farm here in North Carolina. There's approximately the same number of hogs in North Carolina as there are people. Between 8 to 10 times the amount of feces is produced by a hog, an adult hog, as compared to an adult human.
10 million pigs in North Carolina produce the waste equal to 100 million humans. This is the equivalent of the entire U.S. Eastern Seaboard flushing their toilets into North Carolina. But there is no waste treatment. The pigs' waste falls through slats in the floors of the sheds they are forced to live in. It is then pumped into giant waste pits, which leach into rivers and streams, and is pumped out unfiltered onto fields, further polluting the environment and neighboring health.
When you go back and you look at where these hog facilities are located, there's a disproportionate number of them that are located near communities of color, low-income communities. It is definitely a human rights issue.
My sister, she have asthma, and her brother, he have asthma. He's 3, and we don't know what she might have. I have asthma, I have sinus, I have sarcoidosis, that's the bacteria, and I have a pacemaker, which is 6 sinus syndrome. But mostly everybody in this neighborhood got asthma or either cancer. My neighbor there died from cancer probably just last year. My nephew down the street, he's got cancer. He's in terminal cancer, stage 4. Not a smoker, not a drinker. And it's not in his lungs. It's in his lymph nodes. But see, if you live here and saw the way they do, you don't eat no pork. Well, I don't eat bacon because I know where it comes from. When they die, they go into a box. And they decompose because they swell from stretching heat. A truck come and pick them up, take them to the processing plant in Rose Hill, round them up into feed, and feed it back to the hogs. If I come out this door, if he's spraying there, it's going to come in my face. It hit you right in the face. It smells like something that you have never smelled before. It smells like a dead body. It's the family graveyard. I have my grandmother out there, my sisters, my brothers. When we go to the funeral, he used to spray.
During the funeral?
During the funeral, yes. During the funeral. Yeah, he spray. And when the people come, everybody be closing their nose up, saying how it stinks. They can want to have a cookout on Sunday, he'll spray.
Do you think he does it on purpose?
I think so. Because he just sprays Sunday. He always sprays Sunday. And in most of these area, hog houses and turkey house is in the black area or the Hispanic area. It's either or.
Do you think it's also a civil rights issue?
Yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
There have been times in the past that I have gotten ready on the Sunday, and they got ready to go to church and come out, and the smell was so strong that I had to go back and regroup because it got in my clothes and I just couldn't go to church smelling like hogs, I just couldn't do it. So I don't think that the government cares. They care more about cooperation than do people and the business.
And they're going to keep on. They're going to put more chickens in this state. This is the feed season. You're in capital of the world right here in North Carolina. My state. Look, there's a blue line stream right here comes into my property almost, and the Contentment Creek right here. I've seen that blue line stream, that filled with feces and urine from that hog pen, and they can say, well, we feed the world. They're not interested in feeding the world. They're interested in making money. You take the money away from them, they'll let the folks starve. Because if you want to feed the world, you can feed the world with more corn, using corn and wheat and stuff like that, and you can meat. Meat is a luxury item. When we're doing things that hurt other people, we're wrong. But a lot of good people will sit there and eat bacon knowing that it's causing someone else to be very unhappy.
I woke up the next morning to find the Burden River had experienced another massive fish kill from the pollution running off hog farms. Tens of thousands of fish were washing up on shore. All this talk about health, I realized that I was only focused on personal health. But health started to mean so much more to me. It was about health of my family and our communities. I couldn't under good conscience support an industry that I knew was harming others. Pollution from animal agriculture isn't just an issue in North Carolina, though. Raising animals for food produces more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. It is a leading cause of rainforest destruction, species extinction, ocean dead zones, and freshwater consumption. American Diabetes Association actually finally got back, and they agreed to an interview. Preparing for the American Diabetes Association interview, I took a look at their diabetes diet and meal plan recommendations, and they were loaded with foods associated with causing diabetes. How could they expect people not to get diabetes if this was the food they were recommending? And then I saw multiple peer-reviewed studies published on the National Institute of Health website showing that a low-fat, plant-based diet was more than twice as powerful at controlling and even reversing diabetes than the ADA recommended diet that included meat and dairy.
Well, the mission of the American Diabetes Association is to identify a prevention and a cure for diabetes. But in the meantime, to improve the lives of all people who are affected by diabetes.
And what's the best way to prevent this?
For type 2 diabetes, it's unclear. We can't prevent type 2 diabetes in everybody.
When we were doing the research, we came across a lot of studies that said that you actually could potentially cure or reverse diabetes with a purely plant-based diet.
I don't believe there's sufficient evidence to demonstrate that.
How does it compare to the ADA diet that you recommend?
We don't recommend a specific diet. We recommend healthy eating.
The one that's on the website.
We recommend healthy eating. Do you have a whole list of exact day-to-day, the whole meal plan? All they are selections of foods to consider. We do not have a diabetes diet.
But with that selections, I consider that plan compared to a plant-based plan.
No one's done that study.
We found actually some studies, a 74-week study found that low-fat vegan diet versus the ADA plan in type 2.
I think we're done here. I'm not going to get into an argument about.
Oh no, I was just wanting the studies of if this is true or if it shows that.
Any diet works. Any diet works if people follow it.
But if it's a diet that's not the proper diet, like if anyone follows a diet that they eat,
I can't tell you what a proper diet is. I can tell you what an improper diet is.
So then we can talk about the good diets. I'm not sure why.
I'm not going to get into that.
Into diet?
No. If that's where you want to go with this, I'm sorry, I'm not the person that you should be talking to.
And why is that, though?
If that's what you want to get into, I'm not the person you need to be talking to.
Who do we talk to about diet?
You can talk to anybody you want.
But that's interesting, though. Why not recommend a diet?
Because the data don't exist to support it.
But if we see data that we looked up that supports it with, like, the NIH, in Europe, the European Association.
We're done. I'm sorry. I'm not going to get into that argument with you.
That's not an argument.
I'm not going to get into the argument.
Why is it an argument? It's just talking about in European study of diabetes and other places that have studies. Why?
There are lots of studies.
Why is it even an argument?
There are lots of studies in the literature, many of which have never been replicated or, frankly, are wrong. That's why we do peer review. Okay?
The European Association of Study of Diabetes has been peer reviewed? Or
I don't know what study you're referring to, and in the absence of being able to see that study, I'm not going to comment.
I could show it to you.
I'm sorry, I don't have the time for that.
I just don't understand why it's an argument, though. Okay. That was interesting. What he wanted to talk about was people living longer with diabetes. But once you mention eliminating diabetes or prevention, whoa, now you cross the line. Prevention and cure, whoa, let's not go there. Not only did Dr. Ratner, the Chief Medical Officer of the American Diabetes Association, not want to talk about diet, but the fact that he had such an emotional reaction to my question made it feel I was digging into something that he didn't want uncovered. I had always thought there was no prevention for type 1 diabetes, but then I did research and came across countless studies referencing the link between exposure to dairy at a young age and type 1 diabetes.
I mean, this is a food made for baby cows. Cow milk protein gets into the bloodstream, and the body says, hey, this isn't supposed to be in the bloodstream. It makes antibodies to the cow milk protein, which then attack the pancreas and destroy the pancreas.
How is this possible that ADA wouldn't have this forefront on their website? Why wouldn't they be warning all parents about this, even if there were only a slight chance? Why were they recommending people to actually eat these foods linked to diabetes? It seemed all of the large health organizations were encouraging people to eat the very foods linked to the diseases they're supposed to be fighting against. American Heart Association promoting beef, American Cancer Society promoting processed meat, pink ribbons on dairy products, and bacon-wrapped shrimp on American Diabetes Association. And then it all came together. What if? And there it was. The American Diabetes Association was taking money from Dannon, one of the world's largest dairy yogurt producers, Kraft Foods, makers of Velveeta processed cheese, Oscar Mayer processed meats, Lunchables processed kids meals, and Bumblebee Foods, makers of processed canned meats. American Cancer Society was taking money from Tyson, one of the world's largest meat producers, and Yum Brand, owner of Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell. Susan G. Komen was supposed to be fighting breast cancer, was corporate partnering with KFC, Dietz Watson Processed Meats, and Yoplait Yogurt. And the American Heart Association was probably the most disturbing of all, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the beef industry, poultry, and dairy producers, and millions from fast food and processed food manufacturers. Every single one of these organizations was taking money from meat and dairy companies that are associated with the causes of these diseases. This would be like the American Lung Association taking money from the tobacco industry. I was sick of not getting answers. So I went to the headquarters of these organizations myself, and we had to speak to someone in person. There's millions of people dying from the foods that they're recommending people to eat. I wanted to find out why Susan G. Komen had accepted $35 million from Yoplait when their products can increase a woman's chance of dying from breast cancer 49%. And ask American Cancer Society if taking money from KFC and Tyson was the reason they promote eating meat. But every one of these organizations declined to be interviewed.
What's really sad is that we cannot trust information from these leading health organizations like the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, because they are taking money from the very industries who are causing the problems that they're, supposed to be helping to prevent.
So that makes the truth something that you are not going to be hearing as far as nutrition goes from these organizations. Well, that would be the end of their funding, that would be the end of their jobs, that would be lawsuits, that would bring the entire catastrophe down upon their heads, and they would essentially disappear as an organization.
This one time I got invited to a charity fundraiser for the American Diabetes Association, and I showed up, and they had a whole buffet, and it was all just animal products. I remember like a big thing of barbecue chicken. And I was like, I stormed out. I said, like, serving chicken at a diabetes event is like serving alcohol at an AA meeting. It doesn't make sense.
We had scheduled to film an interview with a prominent surgeon, but before we could get inside the building, the hospital's media relations manager stopped us.
Actually, I understand that Dr. said that you could film here today, but unfortunately that's not going to be able to happen. I know that he advocates for patients changing their diets, but the hospital makes money off these surgeries, and the reality is he does too. So we can't do anything that's going to negatively impact the hospital. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to film here today.
I was sickened by how open she was about the hospital being more interested in profits than people's health. But it wasn't just this hospital or these organizations. Even the U.S. government is involved too. Every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture creates dietary guidelines for Americans. The committee who writes these guidelines has been made up of individuals who have received money from McDonald's, the National Dairy Council, the American Meat Institute, the National Dairy Board, the National Livestock and Meat Board, the American Egg Board, Dannon, candy and sugar companies, Coca-Cola, and Anheuser, just to name a few, which means we are getting our dietary recommendations from the very industries that are killing us.
And when they
USDA makes a pyramid or a power plate every 5 years for the American public, they're going to guarantee that on that plate are going to be foods which, when consumed, will result in millions of Americans perishing.
The USDA, which is supposed to be protecting us, has two missions. It's supposed to protect us, and it's supposed to protect the producer. And guess what? When those two come head to head, they usually choose the producer.
In internal documents uncovered by Dr. Greger, the USDA admitted that eggs cannot legally be called nutritious, low-fat, part of a balanced diet, low-calorie, healthful, healthy, can't say it's good for you, or even safe. Yet they still promote these products to the American people through federal checkoff programs.
If you ask somebody if they've heard the checkoff program, the odds are they haven't, although daily they are seeing the messaging that these programs produce. So checkoff programs are responsible for the messages that we see on TV, on the internet, on bus billboards and magazines that say things like, milk, it does a body good, or milk life, beef, it's what's for dinner, pork, be inspired, incredible edible egg.
The dairy checkoff program gave $12 million to Domino's to just market cheese-heavy product. And this is the USDA, this is the government. If you've seen those ads for the Pizza Hut pizza, the stuffed crust, or a pound of cheese, those are all government advertising schemes for the industry. How can we put more cheese on beef? How can we put more milk in a coffee? Things like that to just drive consumption of these just unbelievably unhealthful products. So McDonald's, for instance, has 6 people staffed full-time, according to records we've found, whose salaries are paid for by this government program, but funded by the producers who are regulated by it. And these 6 people sit there at McDonald's headquarters and just come up with ideas.
Triple cheese decker, McCheese muffin stuffed bacon cheese slider? With extra cheese?
Yes. You don't think of it on a day-to-day basis that these are government programs. Wendy's bacon double cheeseburger. Government program. The steak fajita at Dunkin' Donuts. Government program. You would just never think that this just pure garbage from a food standpoint is coming from a federally funded program.
That's one of the things that makes checkoffs so incredibly creepy, is that it is our government telling us, eat more beef, drink more milk, eat more cheese, eat more pork. One of the very effective ways that the dairy industry promotes its products is to reach children, because kids are impressionable, they're going to be consumers for their entire lives, and you might as well get them while they're young. So dairy spends at least $50 million promoting its products in public schools throughout the country with posters with people with milk mustaches and messages like milk, it does a body good, or milk life.
Targeting young people, right? The tobacco industry had to keep replacing their customers who are dying with new customers. The meat industry knows they have to target young people. That's why we have these foods in schools and marketing messages at a younger and younger age for kids to get hooked on all the wrong kinds of foods. So there's all kinds of parallels.
School districts where processed meats are all over the place. Maybe it's going to be bacon on the menu, sausage, hot dogs, or pepperoni pizza. Any of those things are processed meats, and those are pretty much the worst of the worst with a direct link to colon cancer. And yet you have every day in the schools meal items with processed meats.
If the Surgeon General puts warning labels on tobacco because of their cancer risk, why aren't the same warning labels on meat?
Based on the publicly available data, we know they spend at least $557 million promoting their goods through checkoff programs. We know that they spend at least $138 million lobbying Congress. We expect that they spend a good deal more than that in figures that simply aren't publicly disclosed.
The industry's lobbying power is so strong that they can create laws and push through legislation that doesn't benefit Americans in any way, such as ag-gag laws that criminalize whistleblowing or photographing abuses by this industry. Activists in the U.S. can be charged as terrorists for disrupting the profits of any business that uses animals under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, to the even more ridiculous ones like cheeseburger laws.
A cheeseburger law is a law that says a plaintiff cannot recover against a manufacturer, distributor, or retailer on the theory that the food made the plaintiff obese or caused an obesity-related disease.
Cheeseburger laws are a direct response to a problem that the tobacco industry has had. Big Tobacco has paid $400 billion to state Medicaid programs. Cheeseburger laws proponents say We don't want to see the same kind of thing happen to the meat and dairy industries. The fact that these laws are based on a model template called the Common Sense Consumption Act is actually ironic, because what they're saying is you, the consumer, should have the common sense to know that our food is bad for you.
I've often typified the meat industry to people who maybe don't understand its power and reach as it's got all the money of big tobacco and big pharma, and it has the personality of the National Rifle Association. So any little thing that comes up, man, they beat it to death.
Robert Martin wasn't exaggerating. When the profits of the egg industry were threatened by egg alternative company Hampton Creek Foods, extremely disturbing emails were uncovered by Ryan Shapiro and Jeffrey Light.
We uncovered documents demonstrating the American Egg Board considers Hampton Creek, quote, a crisis and major threat to the future of the American egg industry. The American Egg Board considers a successful egg replacer company to be such a threat that they joke on their government email addresses about murdering the CEO.
In internal government emails with the heads of the egg industry, they suggest having the CEO of Hampton Creek, Josh Tetrick, murdered, including a menacing email from the executive director of the American Egg Board.
The meat producers don't have to pay for the heart disease or the environmental destruction or any of the other externalities, as economists call them, that their products cause.
You know, then there's the whole pharmaceutical aspect of it, and the fact that there's a very strong pharmaceutical industry and lobby that has a huge stake in preserving the status quo.
And these chronic diseases, these are the cash cows of the pharmaceutical industry.
You have a $5 billion stent industry. Did they ever want to see that go away? We've got a $35 billion statin drug industry. Did they ever want to see that go away? I'm talking about the pharmaceutical industry effectively controls what doctors are told.
Most research isn't put into prevention. It's put into the medication that we might use for that particular disease. I'm on 2 different high blood pressure medicines, 6 asthma-type medicines, even after 4 years of shots, and then another medicine to help take care of side effects from some of those medicines. I'm on high-level antidepressants, a couple of different pain meds for my back and hips.
I'm taking about 16 drugs, not counting the insulin in the morning. I take insulin in the morning, insulin at night, 32 to 34 units of insulin. Lantus, to be exact. Some of these meds are for diabetes. This is for peeing. I have to use this for my prostate, and then I have to use this for the heart, and I have to use this for blood pressure. And it's just on and on and on and on. The doctors are telling me this is what I've got to do for my whole life, and it's frustrating, and it's very stressful, and I don't know how long my liver's going to last.
Under conventional medical treatment, whether it be for autoimmune disease or even conditions like high blood pressure or diabetes, you're told that you have to take drugs, and not just for a week or a month or a year. You're told you have to take drugs forever. You're guaranteed that if you follow your doctor's advice, you'll be sick forever. You'll never get well. That's the guarantee. Because the strategies are all about manipulating the symptoms, not dealing with the underlying cause.
You come in with that diagnosis, you get a bunch of pills that have nothing to do with the disease causation, or you get these procedures that have nothing to do with disease causation.
It's a deception to say this pill will help you unclog your arteries, this one will save you from a stroke. No, it doesn't. The people who take the statins, etc., they still get their heart attacks, they still get their strokes. This does not reverse disease. This does not make plaques smaller. This is a fraud of massive proportion.
In the U.S., treating chronic disease such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes is a $1.5 trillion industry. That's the GDP equivalent of the 10th richest country in the world. I went back and dug deeper into the health organization's funding, and there it was again. These organizations were accepting millions of dollars from pharmaceutical companies that are making billions of dollars from the very same diseases these health groups are supposedly trying to end. It seemed like a major conflict of interest, unless ending these diseases isn't really the goal. The pharmaceutical industry spends more money on lobbying than any other single industry. Just like in agriculture, they're so powerful they write their own laws that have had activists in prison to silence them.
Government's in bed with anyone that gives them the most money, which is the pharmaceutical industry, which is the
animal ag industries. They are pumping the government full of money and resources, and in return the government's giving them what they want, subsidies, imprisoning activists that go against them. And I think it's quite telling that these industries are working so hard and spending so much money to criminalize people for simply taking a picture, for simply recording what's going on inside of these facilities and making it known to the public. They're behind walls. They're underground. They're in these secret facilities that no one knows about. But if they did, they would be shocked and outraged. And I think people would not want to think that their pharmaceuticals, that their food are coming from these places. And that's why I think the ag laws are what they are, is because they are trying to silence people into not speaking out and not showing the truth.
I finally realized how deep the collusion truly is between government and these industries, and how dangerous it could be to expose them. These concerns intensified after meeting the USDA whistleblower who revealed mad cow disease in the U.S. meat supply.
USDA operates like the military, so when I got on TV and that, right away USDA sent out memos to all the veterinarians and food inspectors. If anybody from the media ever contacts you, do not talk to them. Refer them to Washington, D.C., and we will talk to them. So right away, shut up everybody. American public should be very concerned about this, what's going on with USDA. Here in the United States, we have at least 4 cases of mad cow disease, but I'm almost positive there's more cases than that, but the government isn't looking for it.
So what you're saying is that there could be already mad cow disease in humans.
Right, and I think a lot of it was misdiagnosed. With the Alzheimer's or dementia, it takes several years to see the progression, but to make it easier, these doctors just sign off on it as dementia or Alzheimer's without actually taking a biopsy of the brain to see if it's that, or is it actually a prion disease like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or mad cow disease.
Do you think it's safe to eat meat?
I personally don't think it's safe to eat it because of the fact how the line speeds are increasing, and also our inspectors are not well trained enough. At the present time, the line speed now is going about 220 cows an hour. That gives you about somewhere around 4 cows per minute, so that's 15 seconds per cow.
These dangerous slaughter speeds means that animal waste ends up everywhere. Testing shows 88% of pork chops are contaminated with fecal bacteria, 90% of ground beef, and 95% of chicken breast sample contain animal waste bacteria. There is nothing clean about eating this way. But it just isn't waste. It's also pus-filled infections.
You can see there's a bump or some kind of abscess underneath the hide. Most of the time when the hide's pulled off, either that will open up the abscess and the pus will come out, or if it's deep-seated, when the inspectors are doing their work or the company employees, they might stick their knife into an abscess and it explodes all over the place.
I had heard enough. I was utterly disgusted by the corruption, the greed, the disease, and the abuse I was learning about. The very animals we were killing us and the planet. But so many people eat meat and dairy every day of their lives. And we are so concerned about getting enough protein. Do we have to eat meat to get complete protein?
You want me to jump off this building, don't you? Well, first of all protein is made by plants. I'll state that again for the record. All protein is initially made by plants. All of it. And it is not necessary to eat animal tissue in order to get protein. Only plants have the ability to actually take nitrogen from the air, break those molecules apart, and incorporate that nitrogen into amino acids and then make protein. Any protein you get from an animal is simply recycled plant protein.
If you ate a diet that was calorically adequate, and even things like brown rice and broccoli, and you got enough of it, you'd get enough both quantity and quality of protein. 2,000 calories of brown rice and broccoli is going to be about 80 grams of protein a day, including the essential amino acids that you need in order to maintain optimum health.
I mean, grains are loaded with protein. Beans are loaded with protein. Vegetables are loaded with protein.
You really want to get your protein from plants because plant proteins have a much more beneficial effect on our physiology.
The funny thing about protein is most Americans get about twice the amount they need. Most Americans get less than half the amount of fiber they need. But the conversation tends to always be about protein. So in my mind, it's just this magical marketing campaign that protein has taken on over the decades.
The question is not where do you get your protein, it's where do you get your fiber? I have never in my professional career seen a protein deficiency. I've never seen someone come in eating normal amounts of calories and they're protein deficient. You just don't see that.
So human milk has the lowest protein content ever
in any species ever tested. I mean, that's the fluid that's been designed by evolution over millions of years. And that's just like the perfect food for human babies, right? Perfect food, lowest protein content, any other mammal. And so it gives a sense of kind of protein requirements for anything. So then rat milk, ape milk, donkey milk, any milk has ever been tested.
And you hear this a lot in bodybuilders. They're like, well, I need, chicken, or I need fish to be, to be strong, to build muscle tissue. That is utter nonsense. The largest, strongest terrestrial animals on the planet are all herbivores. The biggest, strongest animals are all herbivores.
When we bring in people and they're on meaty diets and we transition them to a plant-based diet, we always track what they're eating. Their vitamin intake goes up. Their nutrition overall goes up, dramatically better. And these same people might worry in advance, will I get the nutrition that I need on a plant-based diet? The fact is, you're not getting the nutrition you need on a meat-based diet, and you're going to get dramatically better nutrition on a plant-based diet.
For an average-sized guy like myself, I need about 56 grams of protein a day. That's optimum. Probably I really need 30 to 40 grams a day. Diets that are really high in protein create diabetes, create heart disease, create cancer, create the diseases that I'm treating on a daily basis.
But this is the opposite of what all the high-protein diet fads say.
The food you eat determines the bacteria that live in your gut. Well, you eat animal flesh every day. You are summoning up bacteria that eat carnitine. And those bacteria will turn that carnitine into a molecule called trimethylamine. Your liver then turns that into trimethylamine oxide. That's a molecule from hell. That molecule drives cholesterol into the artery walls. And the people who are consuming this flesh-based diet are contributing to plaque building up. They may lose weight on this diet, and that's good. But what's happening inside your arteries, paleo friends? What's happening is that plaque is building up, and these are the folks who drop dead at the gym at 39. Oh, he was lean and he looked really good. But where is that cholesterol going? It's going to your artery walls. So I believe these paleo folks are setting themselves up for an epidemic of clogged arteries, colon cancers, autoimmune diseases. This is not a healthy diet. We are not carnivorous apes.
Humans' closest living relatives are chimps, who get 97% of their calories from plants and the remaining 3% mostly from insects. Comparing the anatomy of true omnivores like bears, who eat both meat and plants, to frugivores like primates, who eat almost exclusively plants, the differences are pretty clear. Frugivore teeth have flat molars for chewing plants, where omnivore teeth are serrated for stabbing and tearing flesh. Frugivore jaws can move forward and back and side to side. Omnivore jaws cannot. Omnivores have much stronger stomach acid for digesting meat compared to less acidic stomach acid of frugivores. The intestines of frugivores is 9 times their body length compared to 3 times for omnivores. This is because meat will putrefy in the gut unless it is moved through quickly. If humans were indeed true omnivores, we would need to change our physiology and appearance quite a lot. But we fit every requirement of a frugivore. We may behave like omnivores, but anatomically, we're frugivores.
Human beings, unlike bears and raccoons, and to some extent dogs, don't have that mixed anatomy and physiology that you see in the true omnivores, and thus we are not true omnivores. In humans, the canines have become really small and rounded and actually function like accessory incisors. They're utterly useless for ripping and tearing anything other than an envelope. So the idea that the mere presence of the canine somehow means that we're supposed to eat meat is silly.
He was right. I always thought my canines were for meat, but what kind of animal could I actually kill and eat raw with these tiny teeth? The thought alone was disgusting.
I mean, everybody loves a smoothie made with fruit and even some vegetables, but if you think about putting a fish or a piece of beef in a blender and grinding it up, the thought is absolutely repulsive.
All these diseases I had learned about were from eating a diet our body wasn't designed for. What would happen if we started eating a diet our body actually was designed for?
The data is crystal clear that you can stop and reverse heart disease with plant-based diets, scientifically shown. I've seen it in my own patients.
People who adopt low-fat plant-based diets can actually reverse their heart disease, and that literally means watching the plaque start to go away, something they didn't think could happen.
My experience with patients is, and the studies show, that when people adopt a fully plant-based diet, their cholesterol levels plummet within a few days. And if you do blood tests in a couple of weeks, you'll see dramatic improvements.
Yes, your numbers are going to look great within a week or two. Your cholesterol can come crashing down. In fact, if you're on medications, your doctor may have to pull off your blood pressure medication so your blood pressure don't drop too low because they can work too good. Like that, the side effect is not having to take drugs.
In a groundbreaking study published by Dr. Esselstyn following patients suffering from cardiovascular disease, 99.4% were able to avoid major cardiac events by going plant-based.
Because it's not just heart disease. It's hypertension. It's diabetes. It's strokes. It's heart attack. It's several of the autoimmune diseases, lupus, asthma, GERD, osteoporosis. I mean, there's a multitude of diseases, even rheumatoid arthritis. It can be so dramatic. And you see these poor souls just absolutely crippled with rheumatoid arthritis go plant-based, then they come off their medication.
I wanted to follow up with Jane Chapman, who had been suffering from severe osteoarthritis, and I could not believe what I saw after only a few weeks of fasting and changing her diet.
So it's so amazing. See, like this.
I know. From going from the walker, needing wheelchair assistance at the airport, to strolling down the street, enjoying the fresh air, the sunshine. 2 weeks. It's all it took. 2 weeks to get off all the meds and start to feel the inflammation just kind of drain out of the body, where the movement was much easier. Just a lot of healing occurred very, very rapidly just by doing the right things for your body.
When you're treating diseases with drugs, there's one drug you take for cholesterol, a different class of drugs you take for high blood pressure, different class of drugs you take for diabetes. But with diet, a plant-based diet affects all these diseases. One diet to kind of rule them all.
The impacts of eating this way go far beyond ourselves. By getting rid of heart disease alone, we would save up to $48 trillion in the USA, 3 times the U.S. GDP.
Conditions like high blood pressure, you don't have to take the drugs the rest of your life and be sick forever. What you can do is live in such a way that it gives the body a chance to heal itself. We took 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure, and 174 people were able to lower their blood pressure enough to eliminate the need for medication.
For inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's, the best remission rates ever achieved through plant-based diet. MS, multiple sclerosis, the best results ever achieved compared to any medical, surgical, any kind of intervention was a plant-based diet.
You can see that with every sequential reduction in animal products, people live longer, they have less heart disease, they have less cancer, they have less diabetes.
You can actually take human cancer cells, put them in a petri dish, and you can drip the blood of those eating vegan, get about 72% suppression in human prostate cancer cell growth in vitro. They wanted to try this again with women in breast cancer. They said, let's see what a plant-based diet can do. After just 2 weeks, their body's cleaned up. You drop their blood on the same carpet of cancer cells. You can clear off the whole plate. This is after just 2 weeks eating healthy, which raises the question, what kind of blood do we want in our bodies?
My background is in industrial and systems engineering, and that was my career path for a long time until I got thyroid cancer, and everything changed from there. I decided that I wanted to try alternative methods and treatments rather than have surgery and have my thyroid removed, which meant I'd be on medication forever, and I didn't want that. I just started reading how a plant-based diet can heal the body, and it has worked for so many people. So I immediately just switched to a completely whole food plant-based diet. After a year, the cancer was completely gone, and my thyroid had shrunk to normal size, and I was completely free of that.
This was tough to believe. Couldn't this all just be from eating healthier, though, like no sugar? Turns out Dr. Walter Kempner from Duke University back in the 1940s was reversing some of our worst killer diseases with diet alone. And the diet he was using was not only strictly plant-based, but it was made up of white rice, fruit, and table sugar.
And he was reversing diabetes, he was reversing malignant hypertension, reversing heart disease, the diabetic complications, reversing diabetic blindness. So these people basically had death sentences, went to him, and were given basically sugar. This horrible diet, but it was strictly plant-based.
If this information had been around since the 1940s, why don't all doctors know this?
We're not taught about the power of food in medical school. No one is taught that the changes that we make with our diet are probably the single most powerful thing we can do to determine our destiny. It trumps our genetics.
Why isn't your doctor telling this? Odds are your doctor never learned any of this. In fact, there's even a bill introduced just mandating physicians get 7 hours nutrition training every couple of years, just kind of stay on top of it. And who came out against that? The California Medical Association. Even the family physicians, the surgeons, all the mainstream medical groups came out opposed.
It's 7 hours. That's a lot, even if it's over 1 4-year period.
So they're not just kind of neutral, but they're actually actively opposing nutrition education.
Ironically, when patients come to doctors with questions, they assume that the doctor knows something about nutrition, and so it's kind of a double whammy that doctors haven't been taught much about nutrition.
Why don't we hear about this from dietitians when nutrition is their entire specialty? It turns out the American Nutrition and Dietetics Association puts out nutrition fact sheets written by the industries themselves. The industries pay $20,000 per fact sheet and explicitly take part in writing them. So you can learn about eggs from the egg industry. You can learn about lamb from the lamb industry. This would be like learning about the benefits of smoking from the tobacco industry.
When people are eating meat, I think of it as a bit like smoking. It's sort of Russian roulette. You may not get diabetes, but your chances of getting diabetes, about 1 in 3. You may not get cancer, but your chances, if you're a man, about 1 in 2. A woman, 1 in 3. Your chances of gaining weight, 2 out of 3. It's not all diet, but most of it is. The best thing that you can do to make sure that you empty all of those bullets out of the chamber and you're not taking risks with your health is to get the animal products out of your diet and eat healthy foods.
I came to True North to help me with my asthma and to lose a little weight, and it's amazing. Just in 2 weeks changing my diet, don't have to take any asthma medication, no antidepressants, no pain medication, no heart medication, nothing, no medications at all. And it's just incredible. I was taking Oxy and Advil, and I was taking 800 milligrams of Motrin 3 times a day just to get through the day because I was in so much pain. And now, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing at all.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So
14 days.
All that medication completely off.
Completely off everything. It's just been so frustrating to me because I went to so many different doctors for help.
Bitches.
And I tried so many different medications to help me with my asthma, and nothing helped. And I was stuck on the couch for the last 10 months, unable to breathe. And now in 2 weeks' time, 14 days, I'm off my medication. And I can breathe, and I feel good, and I can walk. My life has changed. And it only took 2 weeks of a whole plant-based diet.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
It really is. It really is. I feel so blessed and so good and just so happy to be doing this. And I'm hoping that I can be a role model for other people and not be pushy about it because everyone's going to do it in their own time. But thank God my time is now. Thanks.
As powerful as Amy's story was, I knew for some, eating 100% plant-based would still seem extreme.
I think there's this sense that everything's okay in moderation, right? But we haven't seen that moderation works. There really isn't a study that shows that by eating meat and eggs in moderation, you can actually turn your heart disease around and get better.
But I know people who've given up meat and they felt sick.
Yeah, well, it's unlikely that anybody's symptoms are caused by a dead, decaying flesh deficiency. The lack of highly processed animal food products in the diet is not going to be associated with the causal factor about why they're sick. There is going to be a reason why they're not feeling well, but that's not going to be one of them.
So I've had people go vegan, and they come back to me, and they're like, I'm hypothyroid, and my doctor says I'm hypothyroid because plant-based diet makes you hypothyroid. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so what does your doctor tell all his meat eaters that are hypothyroid?
Boy, what's an animal flesh or dairy that you can't get in plant-based?
Cholesterol, heterocyclic amines, E. coli. You know, if you think about it, there is nothing in an animal-based diet that you can't get in healthier form somewhere else.
The only other vitamin is vitamin B12. It's not made by plants, not made by animals either, made by little microbes that blanket the earth. Because the way we live in our sanitized world, unless you're eating bacteria-contaminated foods, we need to get a source of B12 from somewhere. So the healthiest cheapest, safest source is to get a vitamin B12 fortified food or vitamin B12 supplement, not to get it from meat and dairy.
What about people who say they have to eat meat for their blood type or their genes?
It's like I need meat because I'm a Capricorn, or I need meat because I have an A+ blood. I mean, it's like, what do you say? No one has to eat meat. I mean, there's no vitamin, mineral, nutrient that you can't get from non-animal sources.
Valentine's Day, I decided to go vegan and give up all meat, which was never in my thoughts in a million years, but I've heard so much success from people that are vegan. And so I gave up all animal products whatsoever. I've lost 29 pounds. I've been able to cut my meds in half. I've been able to cut my insulin in half. And now I'm going for the moon. I'm going to cut it all out. In the last 6 weeks, we've just had 3 grandchildren. And my ugly face is going to be around to see them graduate from high school and college. I'm going to be here.
My mission is to let everybody know you do not have to suffer from diabetes and cancer and heart disease because someone in your family had it or because the doctors are telling you this is what's going to happen. You can take charge of your health and have a positive outcome just like I did. The reason I'm so committed to this is, my grandmother had diabetes, and I didn't know what I know now about healing the body. And if I did, I feel like she could have lived at least a few years longer. And so it's in her honor that I do what I do. Because I could save someone else's grandmother, aunt, uncle, father from that. So I'm excited about getting the message out there.
There's a common belief that eating plant-based is expensive.
Not at all. It can be done in a very inexpensive way where you buy foods that are in season and you shop in the bulk bins, and that saves a lot of money. You can eliminate a lot of your expenses on your grocery bill by not buying meat and dairy because those things are expensive. Our meal plan for a family of 4 is $25 per person in the family.
2064? Oh, 2064. Whoa. That's for an entire week of food.
Really? An exploding movement of elite athletes are utilizing vegan diets to heal injuries, speed recovery times, and enhance their performance.
Before I was vegan, I was only bench pressing 315 like 5 times. And then after going vegan, I was doing 400, 425. 465, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm vegan and I'm bench pressing 465 pounds. This is ridiculous. And as soon as I went vegan, tendonitis started disappearing. My strength in my right arm started coming back. High blood pressure was going down. You can't be strong and be dying on the inside. That's not strong. That's weak. That's really weak because you look big and strong on the outside. Yeah, big man. No, but your heart's crying for help on the inside. You're dying.
I'm a professional parkour athlete, a 2-time world frEEIing champion, and more recently I got into Ninja Warrior where I'm captain of Team Europe as we won USA versus the world. For something like Ninja Warrior and parkour specifically, you really need to have a good strength to body weight ratio. So I was carrying mass that I really didn't need. And when I went vegan, I lost 15, 20 pounds. I was more agile, I was more efficient, more stamina in my body. Just that extra bit of pop that I didn't have before, it just gave me that extra strength. So this is a very vibrant way to live. It can enhance you as an athlete. For me, 100% better athlete than I was before. So it unlocked a whole new chapter of my training. The science is there, the health is there, the athletes are there proving that you don't need to eat dead animals to be strong, to be healthy.
I started working out when I was 47 years old. All the muscles you see, I gained as vegan. I gained 15 pounds of muscles on my body, eating all plant-based vegan foods. All the aches and pains in my body, it just went away. Because I'm not ingesting so many inflaming foods, the acidic foods that animal products are. Gorillas, rhinos, and elephants, they all get their muscles and strength from eating plants. That's what I do.
I travel all around the world for my surfing, and I've always been able to eat vegan. I feel like if you want something, you can make it happen. I just don't make any excuses. I would never not be vegan now that I know all the benefits and now that I know how it feels to be vegan.
Every aspect of my life has been improved by adopting this lifestyle. I feel better, I perform better athletically, I sleep better, my energy with my kids is better, my focus at work is better, everything is better. My skin cleared up, kept myself trimmed for 9 years now doing this. All I can tell you is that I felt and I continue to feel better than I ever felt before. My friend Jason Lester and I were the first people to do this challenge called Epic 5, which entailed doing 5 Ironmans on 5 Hawaiian islands in under a week. An Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim followed by a 112-mile bike, and then running a marathon, 26.2 miles after that. So we did 5 of those in a row on 5 different islands in a little under a week.
Yeah. You almost die?
Yeah.
Did you die? So I guess the famous question, where did you get your protein in there?
From plants.
Like so many people, I was looking for excuses not to change my diet. But once I finally did, I felt liberated. Within days, I could feel the blood running through my veins with a new vitality. Within weeks, I felt a transformation throughout my entire body and mind. Not only could I survive on a purely plant-based vegan diet, I could thrive. I felt amazing. I competed in my first marathon in 6 years, training half the amount and beat my personal record by 23 minutes. Less than a month later, I did my first full Ironman. Although I could possibly get away with eating a little bit of meat and dairy without ill effects to my personal health, I could no longer willingly support an industry I knew was causing so much suffering to communities, families, and all life on the planet. A whole new world opened up. I felt whole again, connected to a greater sense of what true health is, and where true health doesn't end with me, but begins with us.
If people adopted a plant-based diet, the changes we would see in our individual health, in our national health situation, and in this physical environmental world we live in would be so profound.
I mean, today, you can say, I'm not going to eat that stuff anymore. It's one thing that I can do myself personally to make a difference.
It will give you a greater sense of well-being and happiness when you know that, one, you're not destroying your health every time you sit down to eat, you're not promoting cruelty, and you're not damaging the earth.
I don't want my gains to be at the detriment of the planet of other things. And yet, I'm not weaker, I'm stronger. That's the beauty of it. When you're altruistic, when you make choices for the greater good of others, it comes around, benefits me as well. It benefits us all.
Studies show that we can not only survive, but we can thrive.
I just feel this is a great way to live. Not harming other beings, when we can be healthy and happier. I love it. It's a great life.
I never thought that I could feel this good at this age, and I just want everybody to feel this way. I feel like a 20-year-old. I'm almost 50. Nothing tastes as good as healthy feels, basically.
And so the choices that we make every single day, day in and day out, around our food, has the capacity to bring us true health and optimal wellness, not just individually, but collectively, as a species and for our planet.
We're not going to live forever. But while we are alive, we can live well. And for me as a doctor, that's what I want to see.
Where there's a will, there is a way. And I believe that.
lied to, still being lied to, and they're being fed poison. When are we going to stand up and be the own people that we're supposed to be? This is our TU News. We do news. Inside an old lady office. I TU News. You, me, we. All as one people. I love you more than you love me. Because I know the truth deep down. Peace out, dog and boy. always doing